Here.
Trustee Hoffman,
Here.
Trustee Moreno, he's not here. I'll reach out to him. Trustee Vela,
Here.
Trustee Vettis,
Here.
Student Trustee Caraima Martinez. Absent. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we went a little backwards, so the meeting will come to order. Roll was already taken. We'll start that way. With regard to the flag salute, Trustee Hoffman, could you lead us today?
Sure. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Wait 1 second. All right, today we're going to be going over a facilities item, actually 2 facilities items, and a motion with regard to one of our fellow board members. So it's going to be an interesting day. Well, let's get into it. Before we move to the order of business, Chancellor, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir. It's presented and ordered.
I've joined now.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda and order of business?
So moved.
Trustee Henderson, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any opposition? No opposition noted. We move forward. Let's do a quick roll call. I don't want to mess up anything. Quick roll call on the agenda.
Trustee Buelna,
Yes.
Trustee Fong. Trustee Fong,
Yes.
Trustee
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Trustee Hoffman,
Yes.
Trustee Moreno,
Yes.
Trustee Vela,
Yes.
Trustee Vettis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lupe, we have on, I believe, 6 speakers for items on the agenda, and 6 speakers and 7 speakers not on the agenda. Can I have, since the board provides for a maximum of 20 minutes per topic, and we have, we have 6 speakers, and we may have more. May I have a motion for each speaker to be allocated 2 minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Vela moved, Trustee Moreno second. Roll call.
Trustee Buelna,
Yes.
Trustee Fong,
Yes.
Trustee Henderson,
Yes.
Trustee Hoffman,
Yes.
Trustee Moreno,
Yes.
Trustee Vela,
Yes.
Trustee Vettis.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
I'm going to call on now on matters on the regular agenda item. We have Brian Walsh. So we have the 6 speakers are Brian Walsh, Felipe Agredando, Omar Ricciardo, Yadira Abarca, James McKeever, and Jose Mata. So Mr. Walsh, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Trustee Paul.
Are you on the public right now?
You have 2 minutes, Mr. Walsh.
I appreciate it. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on student housing in particular. I just want to urge the board to really strongly consider all options on the table for student housing. I come from Pierce College, and we're a very large campus, 400 odd acres. And I don't want to be prescriptive to say you should build on our campus, but I think you should do whatever it takes to take care of our students that are housing insecure, they're food insecure. They have a lot of challenges outside the classroom that I think it's incumbent upon us to really look after them holistically, not just how they transfer, not just their grades, but really the holistic needs of the student. That's something I really want this board to consider. And I really think we should embrace student housing moving forward. My office at Pierce College was a dorm at one point. If you all need pictures, I can send it to you. It was a bit tame. It was an animal house, but it is not without precedent. We have had student housing before. We can do it again. And I would even say it's necessary that we do it again. Our students really need it. They can't afford to live near the campus. They're coming from further and further away. And our campus is where the health center is, where the food pantry is. It's where all the services are. And importantly, it's where their classes are. So this is the final step, and I urge you all to strongly consider it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Agredano? Felipe Agredano.
Hello, trustees. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Agredano.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, board members, for moving us forward with this resolution on housing. I just want to thank you for considering this and considering our students. And in addition to our students, I dare to say that our faculty, our staff, and specifically our adjunct faculty are sometimes also in need of housing. This is an issue of housing that is important for many different populations of our district. Our LGBTQI students who are oftentimes homeless, who are oftentimes thrown out of their homes and need a place to stay. Many of our veterans returning from serving our country. Also, our emancipated youth, foster youth who may need housing, our dreamers, our DACA students. This is a very brave and very bold move to consider our students, to consider their needs, not only their education, their health, their well-being, their housing. And I just want to thank you for considering this. Housing, as we've identified in the district, is a top issue for our student housing insecurity. And I just want to say thank you again. In particular, during this month where we honor African American History Month, I want to say that this is one of the struggles that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for, is a poverty campaign, housing, fair housing, and that this is an issue that's important to many segments of our students across the district, across Los Angeles. And again, thank you very much, trustees, for taking this very brave and very bold step forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agredano. Omar Ricciardo? We'll come back. Yadira Abarca. Yadira Abarca. Lupe, is she not on?
I don't see her, sir. We go to the next one, we can come back.
All right. Mr. James McKeever,
He's here.
we can move forward.
Thank you. I come to you today as a graduate of the LACCD system myself. It took me 9 years to get through community college. I was a single father. I came from a very violent household. I moved out on my 18th birthday. And the reason it took me 9 years is because I was housing insecure. I often had to drop classes because I couldn't afford to stay in school any longer. And I needed to just pick up a second job. And a lot of our students go through the same situation. It's not just the people who are homeless, but it's also the ones who are housing insecure. It's the ones who are in violent households or inappropriate households who do not have comfortable spaces to study. They deserve this, and this will help them get through school quicker. It'll help more of them graduate. I'm sure it will improve retention rates amongst these students. It'll improve success rates amongst these students. This will bounce back to actually help our district. Investing in housing is actually investing in the district's future. And this is something that we should have done a long time ago. We're not rebuilding the wheel. There are community colleges even within our state that do have housing. And what I suggest we do is start looking at some of the successful models and follow those. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKeever, Dr. McKeever. Jose Mata? Mr. Mata? Let's go back to Omar Ricciardo, Yadira Abarca, if they're on. If
Jose
they're
Mata's
not,
on, sir, you can speak. Jose Mata. I'm moving him in, okay?
okay. And while Mr. Mata gets going, if there's anyone else who, again, who would really like to speak, if they can be moved and raise their hand, I believe we have to do.
I think we have a Yadira Barca who's waiting to be let in.
Hey guys, can you hear me? This is Jose. I'm here. I had to rejoin as a panelist. If it's appropriate to speak.
Mr. Mata, we can hear you. You're on.
Okay, amazing. So, hi everybody. My name is Jose Mata. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I am an alum from various different LA City colleges, including LA Pierce and LA Valley College. I graduated from the LA CC district back in 2012, and I went on to study in UC Santa Barbara, and currently I work as a in the homeless services world with LA County, and really excited to hear that this is a motion in the works and something that you are considering, and really would just like to strongly urge you all to move forward with this motion because it will have a great impact on the lives of Angelenos, and as we continue to see the numbers of increasing folks and Native Angelenos facing homelessness and housing insecurity with the increases in rent, with the displacement of those folks from their communities. Really, housing is at the forefront of social inequality, and it's impacted by racial inequality and by all the social ills. And this is really a step forward in building a society and a school system and education system that we can use as a model to build equity in our society. And really, without education, I know that my life would have been so adversely impacted, and particularly for people of color who the community college district really serves and offers the second chances to. This will be something that will help them reach those next steps in their lives and create that equity and a more just society. So thank you all for allowing me the time to put my 2 cents in, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yadira Abarca, and then Chris Hannon. After that, if Chris Hannon could be let in as well. Yadira?
Hi, yes, good evening. I'm Yadira Varga. I'm a student at East Los Angeles College. Yes, I think the housing is a very important part that we should be included, because I've met students, I've known athletes have any housing or they don't know where to go. I am fortunate enough to have a family who supports me, and they're willing to let me stay at home. But it's also going to be difficult because once I do, I have a daughter now and they support me, but little by little things are getting tough and they're going to want to let me go. And once things like that happen, it's going to be hard for me to find somewhere to go. But as of right now, I am lucky, but we should be considering other students, maybe if we bring in athletes from different states that get recruited, or just students in general who, once they hit 18, they no longer have a home and they need to go somewhere and they have nowhere to go, especially since in LA, rent is really high and they need somewhere to go, and they need to continue to study in order to get that better life, that better that better money, that better education. That way they could keep growing into greater individuals. So I feel that the housing should be something that we should consider. And yes, thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Adia. Mr. Chris Hannon.
Good evening, trustees. Good evening, everybody on the call. On behalf of the Los Angeles Orange County's Building Construction Trades Council, my name's Chris Hannon. and representing our 48 affiliates and the 140,000 members that they represent. I want to let you know that your colleges represent so much for the community. They play such a key and vital role in getting people ready, not only for our trades, but for everything that's going to be ahead of them in life. The better students feel supported within your colleges and on your campuses, the better they're going to do, the more engaged they're going to be. And without basic needs such as housing being met, food insecurities, it makes it difficult to concentrate on studies. The building trades is 100% supportive of doing our due diligence, looking at every opportunity to build housing on campus so that students' basic needs are met, so that they can concentrate, so that they can be enthusiastic, so that they can excel. And not only will the students be better supported for what comes afterwards, your students have a place within our membership, and we look forward to including as many of your students as possible in the building of those facilities. Those facilities, when built, would be built under our project labor agreement. And what better way for your students to begin their careers in our trades or come back on campus as a former student myself, to be able to work on the campus to provide the much needed housing for your students. Again, the building trades 100% supports the resolution. I look forward to partnering in any way possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hannon. Before we go, there's some other people being led in. Is Omar Ricciardo in?
Hello, guys. Good afternoon. My name is Omar Ricciardo Gutierrez. I'm formerly a student at ELAC, and I'm very in support of the resolution, especially now with the housing security that's happening. And I hope that we can work together so we can be able to build a better model for everyone, for LGBT, for veterans, for single mothers, to be able to provide and be able to finish strong in the schools. I think that's a lot of us Latinos actually face that right now. Right now, I have to worry about in 4 months where I'm gonna live. And I'm happy and I'm proud of everybody that has pushed me, professors from ELAC, to be able to finish my my degree, and I'm happy to be able to finish from ELAC as well. And so I just really want to say that this resolution is going to be able to support students from all walks of life. And so I'm really, really happy that the school is able to be able to do this and help support all of us and everyone that's coming into the school system right here at ELAC and at LACCD.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ricciardo.
Thank you.
Mr. Davudian?
Thank you very much. Hello, Board of Trustees and all. My name is Yepram Davudian. I'm the Department Chair of Communication Studies at Pierce College. And I do want to go ahead and echo all my colleagues and some of our former students in regards to the student housing initiatives and items that we have coming up. I also want to make it clear and also just reiterate that living in California is expensive, whether you want to rent or buy. But what way to address the equity gaps by providing these opportunities that we're going to discuss and we've been discussing. So I do want to thank all of you, not in regards to the boldness of what you're talking about and discussing, but the necessity that you are bringing forward and addressing that it will be the future of our students and our district. So I do appreciate all of you, and I thank you all very much for your time and energy regarding this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Davudian. Lupe, I believe there were some other speakers.
Yes, we have quite a few. Just please raise your hand. You're in the panelist section. If you could raise your hand, we can hear you. How about Marcaria Flores? You ready to speak?
If those of you who, once you're called upon, if you could unmute yourself as soon as possible so we can, be efficient. Okay, next one, why don't you call, I'm gonna call on.
How about Yasmin Cisneros? Yasmin, are you speaking on D1 student housing?
Yes, hello,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank the board with moving forward with resolution number 1. As a student at LACCD, I appreciate you taking us into consideration for student housing and engaging with us. It really does mean a lot. And I hope you hear these stories and take something from them because they are real. These are real people, including myself. And we hope to work with you and to find models that help us and at the same time do not harm the district. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Okay, I think that we have Kat. Kat, are you speaking on D1?
Hi, yes.
Thank you.
Hi. I just want to say pretty much the same thing everybody else is saying on here. I just want to thank the board for moving forward with this resolution as well. As a student at ELAC, I think that student housing is by far super important for all the students who, need it. I know a couple of students who live out of their cars, and it's really sad. And I'm so thankful that the board is taking this into consideration, and I hope you guys go through with it. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is we have a phone number 818-205. If you're speaking on D1 agenda item, you may speak. 2 minutes.
Yes, my name is Robert. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Okay, my name is Robert Smith. I'm the political director for the Pain. There's not a board member sitting there that has never heard me talk about student housing and what we need to do. I've been screaming this top of my lungs for almost 20 years. We have students living on couches that are B students. Maybe they're C students, whatever. They could be, if they're a C student, they could be a B student. They could be in B students, could be A students. C students could be A students. The problem we have is, how in the hell does a child, because these students are children, basically. How in the hell do you study when you're homeless, living off just on the street or in a car? This is ridiculous that we have not moved forward this agenda before this. It's incredible. And I've talked to every one of you on this board about this during your election cycles, your campaigns. I will continue to speak out on this issue. We have veterans. They got out of the military. They're living in cars. They're doing this. They're living on a couch, etc. In a time when we're talking about homeless issues in the city of Los Angeles, and we've got to worry about homeless for college students, people trying to better themselves. It's a shame on us as a society. This is the very best community college system in the nation, and we need to move to the forefront on housing. Thank you, and I'm sorry for being controversial or passionate, but this is a passionate issue for me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Ms. Flores. If you're speaking to an agenda item, go ahead and speak.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead and speak. You're speaking to item D1, agenda item.
Okay, so can somebody, because I was sent this link to join, and I heard like what is kind of going on, but I'd like explanation so I can get to the questions.
You're allowed to speak on the topic that you have cared to speak on. Right now we're talking about agenda items, student housing. Is that your interest? And if not, you can speak. Okay, then go ahead and speak, please.
I have a lot of interest. It's not just one.
You have 2 minutes.
I'm on a timer?
Yes, sir. Ma'am.
What if the timer runs out and I'm not done going crazy?
There's other people waiting. I'm sorry.
But I'm not done going crazy at the end of the timer. Can I get an extension?
Okay. No, you have 2 minutes and we'll go ahead and start right now.
Thank
I
you.
would like you to start in 2 minutes. How about that, ya benzona?
Okay, we'll try this one more time. We will start the timer right now.
Hey, I said start it in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Uh,
I think, Lupe, I think
Yes.
we're gonna move on.
Yes, we are. How about Dr. Marcelo Morales? Sir, you're talking to an agenda item. You can go ahead and speak.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this important issue. I have much gratitude and excitement to be able to talk about student housing. I want to sum up some of my comments in just one important word: opportunity. First of all, it's going to provide a great deal of opportunity for our students to be able to secure housing in the college that they're going to. It's rather basic. It's also an issue in a city as complex as Los Angeles. Having student housing is a basic need. You know, I'm the chair of social sciences at East LA College, but I teach social problems, human services, and human sexuality. In the past 5 years, I have not had one class online or face-to-face that I have not had students that have admitted to being homeless or having homeless insecurity. This is something that is a serious concern for our students. For them to be able to open the doors of higher education, they need to be able to open a door to a secure home. And we are in a position where we can possibly present that to our students. It has been mentioned that this is not unprecedented. This is not something that we traditionally have been doing, but it's something that we have been doing in the past. And it's something that we should consider to do in the future. I started this talk off with talking about opportunity. I also see a lot of opportunity for our colleges and for our district. A lot of the private schools throughout the United States are very focused on providing excellent student housing as a benefit to coming to that college. Enrollment is our number one issue right now, and I do see that providing student housing would help that as an opportunity. The opportunity and I hope we make the right decision.
Thank you, Dr. Morales. Next speaker.
Next speaker is, I think that we have, that's it for now.
There's Patty
Oh,
and
there's,
Gary.
oh, they're for non-agenda items. They're on the, yeah, they're non-agenda items. They're the next section.
Ms. Liddell.
How about Jose? Joseph, are you on item D1, student housing? You can speak now.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about student housing for a minute because I personally know a couple people, and they went crazy because they thought about the reality of the situation, and they thought, you know,
It looks like we're, oh, we have Joanne Waddell. I'm gonna move it to.
Yeah, so I'm speaking tonight as just a member of the college community since the Guild has not taken a position on this issue yet. And in general, I support the bond building program in the district. It's made a phenomenal impact on the district over the last 20 years. But I want to urge the trustees to very carefully consider not whether or not we need housing. That's not the issue. The issue is what the district's role in the building of housing should be. And I urge the trustees to very carefully consider what's happened in the, you know, sort of what could go wrong in this scenario. And so looking back historically, there was the district office on Olympic Boulevard. There was the driving range at City College. There was building on an earthquake fault at Southwest College. There was the Vandy Camp building during the recession. There's currently a possibility that the district will end up paying rent to a charter school. And then of course, there's the UCLA Bluff housing project that failed. And I just want the trustees to consider very carefully, not whether or not we need housing. I think we're all in agreement that that's a very positive thing we could be doing, but what the role of the district should be. Thank you.
Any other speakers, Lupe, on agenda items?
We have one more. Let me ask if, let me see. Card Chu, are you speaking on agenda item? If you are, you may speak.
Excuse me, Lupe.
Hey, can you guys hear me? Is my mic good?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So I wanted to talk a little about. Hey, I'm crazy. You think?
Lupe?
Yes, okay. But they keep on logging on with different names and phone numbers. Okay, so I think we're done, sir.
Lupe, excuse me,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair. There was someone on the chat that says Roger Ortiz.
Oh, Roger Ortiz. Yeah. Thank you, Chancellor. Roger Ortiz.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak today. I've had the pleasure of interacting and getting to know some of you. Trustee Fong, congratulations. You know, I went to, you know, that well earned. I went to Valley College before I transferred to UCLA. And for me, you know, the community colleges, the community college students always seem to get the short end of the stick when it comes down to services, when it comes down to resources, when it comes down to programming that would potentially help them, you know, take their career, their ambition, their goals to the next level. So I fully support this study, and I hope that you guys get that, you know, this will give those students that are sleeping in their cars, sleeping in a sofa, or sleeping on the streets, an opportunity to have safety and security for them to be able to focus on their studies. With that said, thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I look forward to, you know, helping in whichever way I can.
Lupe, is that all? Thank you. Lupe, is that all the speakers on agenda items?
Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to are there any speakers needed to address items not on the agenda?
Yes, and we have our list, so we can start calling them off from that list that we have. And we have Patty and Gary on the line right now. So
Okay, so let's see, we have Mr. Grossman, William Craig, Jerry Edgerman, Enrique Rogel, Gary Cifra, Patty Cifra, and Christina Cantarella. Yeah. So let's go down the list of Mr. Grossman. Mr. Grossman on the list.
I'm here. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Grossman.
Board members, Chancellor, Dr. Jetter, President Buelna, my name is Paul Grossman. I've been a civil rights lawyer for 50 years.
He's the guy.
I started doing school desegregation cases in the South. And this is the single most important argument I have ever made in my life. And accordingly, I'm going to ask if I may please have a little more than the allotted 2 minutes.
That's fine.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I'm not a one-issue civil rights person. Race, national origin, sexual orientation, sex, they all matter to me greatly. But as an individual with 4 disabilities, and as someone who sat in with Judy Heumann at the 504 sit-in, I know disability rights are very, very precious, and they were very hard earned. I know Judy addressed you, but I don't know if she explained that many of the people who sat in at 50 United Nations Plaza were medically fragile individuals. They needed to be catheterized, they needed to be fed, they needed to be toileted, and they risked their lives to get the 504 regulations put into power. These are hard-earned, precious civil rights. And now I see that LACCD is proposing to damage seriously those rights. And I cannot stand by idly and let that happen. When I was a young man in college, LBJ, President Johnson was president of the United States. And I vilified that man, and I was so wrong because of all the modern presidents, he stood up for civil rights more than any other. But he had a quagmire, he had a Achilles heel, and that was the war in Vietnam. And his generals kept telling him, you've spent so much money, we've wasted so many lives, you've got to go in with even more lives. and some even recommended to him a nuclear option, which thank God he didn't use. Payan and Mason versus LACCD is your quagmire. And you are now being asked to pull the nuclear trigger. You're being asked to file for certiorari in the Supreme Court of the United States to challenge and eliminate disparate impact as one of the three primary tools through which disability discrimination is addressed. And I know many people have tried to explain to you the difference between all the different kinds of the three theories. And they probably told you disparate impact is the one that doesn't need intent. But I'd rather try to teach this issue quickly in a different way, which is, imagine if you had a blind student who wanted to register for your classes and the only registration tool permissible was online. And the blind student called DSS and said, I've tried to use your website and it's not accessible to me. So DSS says, okay, we'll have a work study student read to you every single entry in the registration system. And about 8 weeks later, the student will finally have figured out what classes he or she wanted to take, but it'll be too late. Disparate impact is the only tool through which systemic barriers to equal educational opportunity for people with disabilities can be addressed and eliminated. If you cut us down to just reasonable accommodation, we will not be able to attend community college, and we won't be able to attend it anywhere. Because if disparate impact is eliminated, it will affect our access to healthcare, to public transit, to every store, to every facility on your campus. It will even undercut some basic sex rights. That's right, it can injure Title IX in the same way that it could injure Section 504. You are alone in this position. You are alone in this action. It would be impolite for me to ask, but I believe you do not have the faculty senate with you. I believe you do not have the student body with you. Nearly 10,000 people have now signed a petition against filing for cert. This is not your right. This is my right. It is my civil rights. Institutions don't own other people's civil rights. People own their civil rights. And you may not borrow it to gain a temporary advantage in negotiations or a temporary advantage in litigation. And let's face it, and Dr. Jeter is welcome to tell you that I don't have it right, but from my perspective, you have lost this case at every single turn. You lost it on motions. You lost it before a judge. You lost it before a jury. Indeed, the jury awarded Mr. Payan $40,000 in damages. And I need to tell you, having followed disability law for my whole life, I only know of 3 other cases in which a higher education institution had to pay damages to a student. If you watch the Ninth Circuit argument, it's clear the judges don't think you have a very compelling case. Now, does that justify the nuclear option? It does not. You can negotiate as hard as you want. You can go back to district court and litigate. Again, don't give up. Fight it if you must. But please, please don't go to the nuclear option. Tomorrow, unless you decide not to seek cert tonight, I'm going to do a teach-in with your student body, and you can most certainly expect to hear from them as well. Also tomorrow, I'm going to find out whether my chemotherapy is working or not. But you know what? I'm prepared for either answer, because I've spent my life amongst people with disabilities, and they have taught me courage and resilience and creativity. And what I don't want to happen is to have your campus, your system lose the opportunity for your students, and these are students of color and students of every national origin. I don't want your students to lose the same opportunity I've had through my life to be exposed to these kind of individuals. So in closing, I'm going to beg you, literally beg you, please tonight, meet and decide. However much we're going to fight this battle, the nuclear option is taken off the table. LACCD does not stand for mass casualties. When LACCD tells its students with disabilities, we care about you, it cannot turn around and cut off their rights. It must honor the rights of all its students. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grossman, for the time. William Craig.
We have Patty and Gary on.
Okay, well, I'm going by the list.
Okay.
Is William Craig here?
I don't see him.
Okay, Patty and Gary?
Yes, we're here.
Yes, we're here, and we know that William is here too, but he's having a little technical difficulty.
We'll go back to William. That's okay, but you can go.
Okay, allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Patty, and this is Gary, my husband. He's a legally blind student at Los Angeles Valley College, and we are both co-treasurers of the Abilities Club, which is a student government club that represents students with disabilities on campus. And thank you, Mr. Grossman, for that powerful speech. We look forward to the workshop tomorrow. We want to use our time to say we watched the Cayenne versus LACCD Ninth Court of Appeals trial on YouTube today. From our perspective, as my husband has me as his personal assistant, and he's very lucky. I attend class with him and help him with all the reading material, etc. But many students don't have that fortune of having a personal assistant, so they have to go it alone. And it's scary for them and daunting, and they feel excluded. We have to say that the campus is well equipped. We're very grateful for that, for the accessible pathways, etc. But we support Hannon, and we ask LACCD in the trial we watched. The legal costs are staggering. Close to $1 million for the plaintiff, Payan, and LACCD, if it goes to trial lawyers, it's going to be over $2 million. What a sad waste of, money. The judges at this trial had recommended to the district and to Payan's lawyer to sit down, mediate, and work out an agreement, a way to make all this situation better. And it's not going to cost all that much. I mean, I think equipping students with, personally, we recommend from the, first of all, the creation of abilities clubs on all 9 campuses. So the students have support in the student government. We recommend chaperones, so students have help registering, because the registration process is very difficult, very prohibitive, as Mr. Grossman was saying. Just to navigate through the I think it's called Canvas, the online registration. I've sat down with friends who are have disabilities, and they have a really hard time with it. So I suggest to them, go to the SSD office, go to your student service services for special needs students, and ask if they can help you. But there's a lot of forms to fill out, and it's overly complicated for them. So for myself, I suggest a system where you have like work study, where enrolled students who want to get credits, work study credits, can attend, can be available through SSD to help students with disabilities register, to help them in their classes, like shadow them when they go to first day of class, have kind of like a mentorship or program, something where the students with disabilities can call them, can turn to them for assistance. Anything you want to say, Gary?
No, I think you said it all. And I was saying is maybe it'd be a good thing if you had a class, we get a credit or so for helping students take notes.
Note
things like that.
taking.
That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
They have that.
That's all I have to say.
Hey,
We have
thank you.
that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. William Craig?
Okay, am I on? I had to do the panelist thing.
You're on, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, I really appreciate everything I've heard so far. I'm William Craig, and I'm the president of the Abilities Club. I've been in that position for the last few semesters. And what I want to encourage LACCD to do is to think about what damage it'll do to students who desire. See, Fred, let me just preface what I'm saying with this. I'm in a wheelchair. You can't see it. I use a wheelchair for mobility after a traumatic brain injury that I suffered. I am adamant, and my club is adamant about empowering students challenged with disabilities, because we are the only demographic of people identified by what we can't do rather than what we can do. And we want to change that. And what we've done is some research, and there's over 900,000 disabled adults in LA County alone, enough to fill all 9 LACCD schools up with students. And what you're really doing a disservice to our cause by making students challenged with disabilities think that you don't support what we're doing to go from being looked at as deficits to assets in the community. We want to enhance our ability. So what we're doing is we're doing a Focus on Ability campaign where we're encouraging people in the community to not fall prey to the stigma of what they can't do and rise to the call of ability, so that we are recognized by our I can rather than our can't. And it will really behoove LACCD to show the community that they have a heart to see it, to help us get. It's hard enough for us in life without having the academic world against us stopping us from pursuing in the optimal way our education. So I'm just saying, please abandon this appeal and let the community know you're here to help students challenged with disabilities rather than hinder them from. They deserve a profitable education just like everybody else does.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's it.
Jerry Edgerman? Enrique Rogel? Mr. Rogel? Christina Canarella?
Hi, yes, thank you so much. Hi, my name is, sorry, I'm with my son here at LA Valley College. At LA Valley College, along with my son, Johnny, who's right next to me here. I don't want to repeat what
We lost you, ma'am.
Mr. Grossman and Patty, but I do want to share a couple things with you. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to just get this connected. Okay, Johnny, I'm going to have my son Johnny share something first. Johnny, right here.
Just because I communicate at college like my friends, I deserve the same rights as my peers in my Broadcasting 46 class. This is not just a civil rights issue, but a human rights issue. Please let me be a part of my community. I have a lot to offer and want to learn vocational skills. We have been excluded for so many years. Please don't risk adding more barriers to me and my community by taking this to the Supreme Court.
I would like to add, I'm just trying to get to my notes section, but when I do that, apparently you lose me. Can you still hear me when I go to my notes, or do you not hear me at all?
We can hear you.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. So I'd just like to read for a moment what I had written. So on January 21st at the LACCD Disability Summit, Chancellor Rodriguez said that community college is for everyone, that the doors to community college are open to everyone. When you open a door, someone can walk through it. But in making somebody feel welcomed and supported when they walk through that door is very different than just having them be open to having them come in. The mission of LA Community College District is to foster student success for all individuals seeking advancement by providing equitable and supportive learning environments at our 9 colleges. The LACCD will strive to become a national leader in student success by providing high quality, accessible educational opportunities across the greater Los Angeles area that improve students' lives, enrich the area's many diverse cultures, and strengthen the regional economy. The district will do so by continuing to provide a culture of continuous learning and by closing persistent equity gaps. What happens is that, and Chancellor Rodriguez said this, that it's not just about disability, equity, and inclusion, but it's about disability, equity, inclusion, and access. And it should be disability, access, equity, and inclusion. Because without access, you don't have inclusion and you don't have equity. I am asking you to please do not send this to the Supreme Court. I am a mother of a 24-year-old and a mother of a 31-year-old. Both boys. I have had to fight for the rights of my son for over 24 years to get him to be included, to get him to be accepted, to get him to be part of his community. I don't know if any of you sitting on the board of trustees have had to do that for your children. But when you get to do that, you start to look at life differently. I could look at life and I could have my fists up and my hands raised and clenched, but I have come to every opportunity and every organization with my arms open wide and saying, how can I help you help my son? How can we work together on this issue to make it inclusive? How can we work collaboratively together to change the world for the better for every single human being? We know that when we include everybody, things change. It creates a platform of compassion, empathy, kindness, gratitude, acceptance, tolerance, and many more opportunities. If you take this to the Supreme Court, you risk having the definition of disparate impact changed. And this will not only affect the disability community, it will impact Title IX. They use the same terminology of disparate impact. It will impact women, it will people of color, it will change every underrepresented community. If you take it to the Supreme Court, you risk changing the civil rights and human rights of all underrepresented communities. Please reconsider what you are potentially going to do. This isn't even about the money. It isn't even, the attorneys are moving forward to change disparate impact. I beg you, please. In the last semester, we were able to get 12 students enrolled in LA Valley College because of what we're doing here. We are telling people what incredible resources are here at the community college that you have all helped create. If you block this and put these barriers up to our community, we will go back, like Mr. Grossman said, you will set us back more than you realize. Thank you for your time. I hope this means something to you and you really take into all the words that were here today. I would not come here if it was not important. This is the most important advocacy that I've done for my son, and I don't do it just for him. I do it for every underrepresented community. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you today. I appreciate that.
Ms. Canayera, thank you very much. Lupe, is Enrique Rogel on?
No, sir, he's not.
Okay. Is there any other person to speak on non-agenda items?
No.
Okay.
If anybody is, they can raise their hand, but right now we're done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move forward to information items. And let me just say to the speakers right now who spoke on disability, I just want to thank you for taking the time. The board is listening. A lot of you took the time to make a passion statement to the board, and the board is listening. And I just wanted to say thank you for all of you who took that time. Lupe, if we can please, so joining us today is Chief Facilities Executive, Dr. Ruben Smith, to present an update on LACCD's capital improvement assessment. Dr. Smith? And Dr. Smith, are you, how do you wish to take, could you let the board know how the presentation is going to be made, who's going to be making the presentation, and how you prefer questions?
I'm going to give a, well, thank you, President Bona. I'm going to give a presentation on the facilities update. And at the conclusion of that presentation, we can ask questions. It's a very brief presentation, but it does precede the resolution, which are pretty much tied together.
Thank you very much. And during the resolution component, the team will be available to answer questions as well?
That is correct. I will turn it over to the Shepherd and Mullins team, Alfred Frejo and Kira Conlon.
Okay. So board members, if you could let the presentations conclude, then if you could write down questions, and then all your questions can be answered, for this particular section. So Mr. Smith, take it away.
Thank you, Board President Bona. And thank you, members of the board, Chancellor, and all the participants tonight, as well as those who are in the audience. Tonight is basically a facilities assessment update that's building on what we presented at FEMPOC in January. And so what I want to share is, rather than rehash everything there, is the facilities assessment is to provide an update on the existing condition of our facilities, determine the facilities needs, and then offering flexible options as we go through a consultation with each college. We also aim to confirm if there are any unmet facilities needs that were identified in 2016 that still exist, and then signal if those conditions have worsened and the risk associated with maintaining the status quo. What you have here is a facilities conditions index. This is basically a definition of what you often hear the acronym FCI, FCA. Well, this is that formula that makes up the Facility Conditions Index. Next slide, please. This is one slide that shares what the Facility Condition Index is. And what you'll see here is you see the higher number is basically the poorer the facilities are operating. So the goal is to have a very low number, and the transition to a very low number with the Facility Condition Index is that's where we make repairs, replacement, we demolish buildings, those numbers tend to go up. And what you see here is you'll have a few facilities, a few colleges that are under 5% with a balance of that number coming in at 15 or 20%. The next slide, please. Now, this is the evaluation team and strategy is something that for us, we wanted to share with you that after attending one of the AIA webinars, I recognized that the Associates Institute of America Architects Institute of America has a 2030 commitment. And this is looking at the hopes of a post-pandemic period is the importance of adaptable and resilient design in schools, where we have most of the underutilized spaces, identifying those, and then reimagining hallways, trapped spaces with no community, looking at outdoor spaces, and then how do we downstream have an impact on the life cycle, cost savings. And so what I've done is looking at the evaluation team, we're looking at specifically having subject matter experts and looking at the industry to help us get there. So rather than have one assessment team, we're looking at having an infrastructure assessment team. We have that contracts there. Sustainability, housing, athletic facilities, technology, and land use. How do we best utilize our land, looking at that as a strategy, a portfolio strategy, and then possible acquisition to ensure that we're offering the best space possible, looking at the needs as we go through this assessment. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've identified definitely as a concern is our pre-70s buildings. So the buildings built before 1970 is definitely a concern for us. That means that right now we're actually grandfathered in with the Division of State Architect. Those buildings are grandfathered as code compliance, which was something that we constantly monitor. Now, one of the things that everyone should know is this is not a special opportunity for us to do an assessment. We typically do assessments internally, annually, looking at all of our facilities from a perspective of developing a 5-year plan of something that we should do, looking at deferred maintenance, predicting overhaul, and without breakdown so we don't impact instruction. But when we look at the 1970s buildings, there's a number of buildings to consider across the district. There are about 128. And so when we look at that 128 buildings and we start to narrow down buildings that we think will that are scheduled for demolition or unoccupied, it gets down to roughly about 75, 80 buildings. But that 75 or 80 buildings, what's critical there is it's over 2 million square feet of space. And so when we look at that 2 million square feet of space in those building types, we have a number of general classrooms, laboratory buildings, stadiums, gymnasiums, auditoriums. We have studio space, offices, career tech, and the list kind of goes on. But those are spaces that we definitely need to either support the student success or that actually are impacted directly for student success as instructional spaces. And so we're monitoring the facilities condition index, and we're monitoring the assessment of those buildings because infrastructure is definitely a challenge. Accessibility within those buildings are still a challenge. And when we talk about accessibility in those buildings, we're looking at interiors where do we have adequate pathways? Do we have cane detection around structures? Do we have cane detection at water fountains? And so how do you navigate through that building? Seismic upgrades. Things have changed periodically over the years with seismic requirements to ensure building safety and adequate exit and entrance, exit in case there is an issue. The infrastructure is definitely a challenge. It's great that we're looking at providing really wonderful classrooms, and Vice Chancellor Lids is here with me tonight to share a little bit about some of the classroom technology, but unfortunately, what's going on in the buildings, that infrastructure has a limitation and a bandwidth limit that we just can't really provide as much as we possibly could in a newer building into those pre-70s buildings, and then also the utilities as well as security. Next slide, please. So aging infrastructure in between buildings is what I briefly touched on. One of the things that we have to consider is the wet and dry utilities, the ability to electrify buildings. As we're looking at the 2020 resolution, Clean Energy and Sustainability Resolution, we're decarbonizing. That's a goal. We're looking to move away from that. But electrifying buildings has a direct impact on the pre-70s buildings because we have to look at, or even some of our 80s buildings, 90s buildings, because we have to look at the conduit size, the ability for us to electrify and to improve those spaces. We also have to look at roadways and parking lots. We're looking at stormwater, water quality. We also have to consider something that we were cutting edge and we were mavericks on is providing the solar's power, photovoltaics. Most of our photovoltaics are at that 20-year point. How efficient are our PVs operating right now? My guess is probably in the 70% range, but it could be a lot less. And so replacing those systems for something more efficient is something that we should consider. Technology infrastructure is something I already touched on. And then transitioning from from the technology that we're providing in between the buildings, not just our exterior and to our campuses, but between the buildings and in those classrooms. And so at this point, I'd like to transition this presentation over to Vice Chancellor Lids to share about hybrid flexible classrooms. And you can transition to the next slide.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Smith. I agree with you wholeheartedly. There is a lot more that we could do in terms of infrastructure. And particularly as we are looking to have hybrid flexible instructional spaces, we find a significant level of limitations in the pre-70 spaces. Where we can't even install cameras on the walls or put a confidence screen, as you'll see in a little bit. So we've all heard about the high flex instructional spaces, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but basically it highlights from a student perspective, it allows our students to participate while they are in the classroom or remotely via Zoom, or participate fully asynchronously. From a faculty perspective, it allows them to teach live and virtual at the same time. It allows them to do lecture capture if they would like to use capturing the content or recording video content for asynchronous video playback or for additional content. Also, they can use traditional in-classroom lab materials, such as our document cameras or other teaching aids that they wouldn't have in a remote environment. For example, record an experiment in the classroom that they can share with the students as additional content for them to utilize in the classroom, whether synchronously or asynchronously. Next slide, please. We have set up a standard design for the hybrid flexible instructional space. The illustration is illustrative in nature. Obviously, our classroom are somewhat larger than 2 students, but what we're trying to identify is that we kept a couple of things in mind. One, the ability to engage in-person and remote audience, maintaining the learning experience and high quality learning experience for our students, a modular design approach so we can add if necessary. Simplicity, we have built our solution on tools such as Zoom and equipment in the classroom that our students and faculty are already used to, and also easy support and maintain. Of course, we keep ADA accessibility in mind. So all of our hybrid flexible spaces have this design. From a technology perspective, we have a confidence monitor, which is installed on the screen. You'll see there on the back of the room for the instructor to see what the students are seeing when they are remote. A camera that is following the instructor in the room. So if the instructor is writing on the whiteboard or is conducting an experiment, the camera will be following the sound. It will be following the instructor. And again, we have the Zoom integration, which is a familiar solution for our faculty as well as the students. The ceiling, the microphones are in the ceiling, so they are non-intrusive. In addition to that, the faculty can also use their lapel microphone if they so choose to. Some of our faculty have made use of that during the pandemic. Depending on the size of the room, multiple confidence screens and multiple cameras will be necessary to accommodate for the specific configuration. So this is our standard design that we have introduced for the district, and it's being adopted currently. We have a project of incorporating 225 rooms district-wide at this point, but we anticipate that as the demand for hybrid or flexible instruction space continue, that demand will increase. We have had to turn down a lot of the requests for configuring rooms that were in buildings built pre-1970s, because we couldn't install those confidence screens and the cameras and what have you. I think that's my last slide, Dr. Smith.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Lids. I really appreciate that. And so as we transition to athletic facilities, I just want to reiterate that it's important for us as a facility group. We always look at space utilization reports. We're looking at capacity load ratios. We're looking at the data, and we try to drive design that way. But I also recognize and understand that it's about the environment that we create for student success. So we want to make sure that these concepts are accommodating for the disadvantaged, that the funding is distributed in a way that meets the needs of targeted groups. It's something that I often always refer to as the Jedi Initiative, and that's ensuring that we have justice, equity, diversity, inclusion in what we do, and our thought process toward providing an uplifting space for individuals, confident space for individuals, an opportunity for people to feel empowered to flourish economically, intellectually, emotionally, and to eliminate some barriers. And so this is something that we're looking at as we walk through this assessment process and making recommendations. We want to make sure that we're considering the collaboration of those already looking at things beyond our scope. And so we're looking at partnering, we're looking at outreach, and so we will connect with each college as we go through this process and ultimately come to a recommendation. And so when I look at this and I look at athletic facilities, we're looking at this needs assessment usage. How are we using the facilities? Student retention and recruitment, not just for competitive sports, but for students for recreation that don't have that opportunity anywhere else, who can't afford a gym membership. Opportunities for shared community space. We see the challenges, within our own programs for shared space and opportunity for our athletics to happen. So, how can we help the community and create space and operate within our campus? Of course, compliance with Title IX, college-to-college equity, and partnership opportunities for workforce development. These are things that we can create, and within some of our facilities, not just athletics, that we have this workforce development opportunity where ultimately training and job development can lead to internships and opportunities within our buildings. So just reimagining how we utilize our buildings and facilities, and not necessarily only focused on that square footage, but it's a holistic approach to deliver a service. Next slide, please. I did touch on environmental sustainability and a little bit about our sustainability goals, but this is something that we're looking at as a roadmap. Of course, we want to decarbonize. We want to get to a point where we're providing electrical vehicle charging stations across the district. But one of the things that's important is looking at the integrated energy resource plan. It's a roadmap for us towards clean energy. We want to make sure that we're controlling and predicting maintenance. And that's why we ultimately will be able to better utilize our existing budgets and improve efficiencies through a lower total cost of ownership. Next slide, please. Student housing. Again, college outreach is significant for us in doing this environmental scan. Not going to create this in a vacuum. Going to leverage partnerships and looking at successful models across the state, and then reviewing our lessons learned approach. I'll be taking a visit tomorrow to do just that. But again, something that I want to bring back again is we're looking at assessing the student demand. Desired housing models. What are those unit types need to look like? Thinking about the single parent, thinking about how we need to best serve our students, and looking at the partnership model in those facilities. Ultimately, what do we need to offer our students beyond what we know what we can do, but looking at those services that need to meet the demand of student that we can have with our partnerships, both with the county as well as other philanthropic endeavors. Feasibility studies are important, risk assessment, of course, and the total cost of ownership. Ultimately, I do not want to make a recommendation that has an impact on the general, on our general funds. We need to be able to have this, have a housing program, if so supported, that is self-sufficient and reliant, and making sure that those funds generated have an opportunity to ensure that we're paying for the maintenance and operation of those those facilities. And then student housing policy development. That's something that we're going to work on and make a recommendation. Moving to the next slide, very similar approach for workforce housing, if that should be considered as well. And then building not only on what I've shared with the student housing, but we're going to also look at barriers and challenges there as well. Next slide, please. Ultimately, we're looking at a timeline that we want to, assessment started. We're looking at stakeholder engagement to happen this month on through June. We want the assessments to complete late May for some review discussion before ultimately making another recommendation in the future. We do have to consider filing deadlines. We have to consider an election. So if there's anything that that goes here with the resolution, we're just looking at the timeline for consideration and discussion of what that would be. Next slide, please, is next steps. We're going to continue with the assessment. We're going to develop a recommended project list. We're going to look at community survey, and we're also going to continue to provide continuous updates at the Facilities Master Planning and Oversight Committee. And that concludes my presentation. I can take questions here, or we can move directly into presenting the resolution of Board President Bola.
You're on mute, sir.
Sorry. I'm going to go round robin. Trustee Henderson.
Okay. Thank you, President Wellman. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Lids and Dr. Smith. I have no questions at this moment. Thank you.
Trustee Vettis.
You know what, Mike, I don't have a question on this presentation. I think it covered obviously lots of space. I do have questions, and to be honest with you, since it was not part of the agenda posting, I didn't get a chance to sort of view all the elements here. But can you talk about how this presentation relates to the resolution that we're going to be having in front of us, or should we take that during the resolution? Because I think there's elements of the resolution that tend to focus more on housing pieces as opposed to all the different elements that are listed here. So I would say, from my perspective, I had a lot more questions on the resolution, and most of the questions are here in this presentation. But how can this presentation be more accurately represented in the resolution that's essentially asking for the intent of the board to move forward to the election process?
Would you prefer to have your question answered now or during the resolution stage?
I mean, I think it's, if you can take a shot at it. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be a separate presentation for the resolution, but it was presented as this is the sort of precursor and preparation for that resolution. But I'm just saying that it feels like there's a lot of missing components to the resolution. The housing piece is there, but all the other components are just not part of the reso, and I'm just trying to understand why.
Vice Chancellor.
Thank you for that question, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide clarification. One of the things that we did include as a recommendation for the resolution was to consider all the unmet needs of facilities as well as student basic needs. And ultimately, those facility needs are going to have to be driven by the culmination and completion of these assessments that we started in January. So ultimately, yes, that's where a project list will be delivered. That's ultimately where recommendations and language that could lead to an order of an election based on all of that information. We don't have that yet. So unfortunately, that's something that we're still working on, but it will be derived from the results of our outreach efforts as well as our assessments.
Okay, well then let me go back and ask some things that weren't talked about here and see if maybe, because, you know, to be honest, I think that that response sort of says it's covered in a catch-all, that anything that could be raised could be catch-all. But we've taken time to, you know, set aside student housing or the housing piece a little bit more intricately. But from the content, I mean, when you say adaptable and resilient design, which I think is valuable and important, you know, we saw the classroom, but what about common areas of, you know, library, student support systems, all those kinds of things? Because I'll tell you this, I mean, you know, and it probably could use a study of what does the library of the future look like? I know, you know, I think the Yale School of Architecture was debating that many years back and had a bunch of podcasts on that kind of stuff. But, you know, we're continuing to build libraries that look like libraries from 30 years ago. Like, how do we capture, you know, sort of those gaps? And if it's not going to be captured in a called out study or a called out space, how do we do that exactly? And how do we ensure that those sort of student support systems can look like the classrooms that Vice Chancellor Liz presented, where, you know, they're obviously extremely flexible and certainly would be as resilient to, you know, future pandemics or continuing endemics or whatever. But how do we handle sort of those spaces? And then the other part to it too is that we just went through probably a good decade of open floor spaces. And I'm not sure that whole design sort of meets the resiliency standpoint. It may not be as adaptable as we need it as well. But how are we sort of confronting? I guess the overall question is, you know, perhaps we need you know, a study in itself that deals with health and safety and that deals with technology and that deals with sort of what really is the design for resilient, you know, sort of spaces.
Excellent comments and question. I actually really appreciate that. One of the things we actually had the benefit of is at West LA, we have the HLRC project where we did an extensive study on library space and some of the spaces you referenced. And that's why it's really important for us to leverage the partnership and the team strategy is bringing in those industry experts, bringing in those architects and those designers to share that with us. We do have varying changes in our standards now that we've actually captured on some of that with new building spaces that we're providing right now. So we are seeing some of that benefit. We are seeing the benefit of studies and assessment. And remarkably, you know, I have to be honest, sometimes it depends on the team that you hire because you do see a strong support moving forward with similar libraries that we saw 30 years ago having some of that space today as well. But looking at it, you know, it's going to be a campus by campus assessment based on, you know, the needs of that community and that campus. And so that's something we're looking at and we're constantly looking at our standards. We're constantly looking at the industry to be informed, learning from those lessons that we looked at. So we will get more succinct as our studies move forward to the specific spaces.
Okay.
And if I could, Trustee Vettis, this is Alfred Freihoff for the record and counsel for the district. I think those points are really important and are a precursor in a way on the first item in the resolution that talks about the issue around needs assessment, where it's really important to think broadly as we frame the potential research inquiries and data-driven analysis around facility needs, not just in terms of what's possible in addressing, you know, a district that wants to modernize and wants to innovate, but really beginning to do that stress test around the existing facilities. And part of the work that we have done is to really base the assumptions that we have in the resolution on the excellent work that's been done to date. Part of that was in the presentation that Dr. Smith made We acknowledge the fact that there has been significant critical thought around that resiliency piece, particularly around the pandemic, how classrooms would operate, the need for rethinking the way that our facilities integrate into both the public and private, more open space, right? And internal spaces where our students are operating and thriving. So we're building from that. And then taking the issue around housing, which is relatively new for the district, and focusing on it. But it really is not intended to be myopic as to housing. It's really intended to build on a foundation of already existing research that the district has undertaken, existing needs assessments that identify the issue around housing consistent with the public comments that were made, and building from that.
Okay. No, I appreciate that answer. And I just want to sort of put it in balance here, and I'll make my last point and comment question. All of this stuff deserves sort of study and assessment as well, and to be sort of listed maybe at the same level as the way we put housing, because it's just as critical and sort of certainly in as much flux for today as it's ever been. So I think to sort of, not have that balanced better. I think, really, like I said, for some of us that only got a chance to read this within the last 24 hours, felt like there was a gap. And the presentation covers plenty of the gap. So in some ways, and I'll ask the questions when we do the reso, if possible, we can reference this document specifically on the resolution, because I think that would be immensely helpful because it covers a number of the areas. But I would also assess that deeper study is probably needed on some of these. I mean, I feel like we're doing the high flex classroom with the campus community, right? And we still haven't found consistent standards for student learning spaces and support systems and libraries. And we're just sort of, we're giving our architects and design teams and our building user groups the ability to sort of still design in the past as opposed to be resilient and future thinking. And, we do need some better guidance there. But so this is my, and certainly I've been making comments about athletics and community uses and all those kinds of things. And so the presentation does cover all that stuff, and I very much appreciate it. And certainly with the energy efficiency and our sort of goals in the future. But can you sort of help me with one other piece that I think is going to be a community conversation? We've essentially been, I'm not going to say mothballed, but very close to mothballed for the last, 2 years, 2.5 years. The campuses haven't been wide open for quite a long time. And we're proposing and whatever the final amount is that we get to propose, how do we deal with the fact that the campuses themselves, they didn't necessarily weather the pandemic well in terms of being an open space for people to operate. I'll use a comparison, like our public parks got hammered, during the pandemic, because it's one of the few places that people retreated to. But K through 12 and community college facilities weren't quite as resilient as we'd like to be. But when we talk about facilities wearing down, we had very little use of them for 2.5 years. And we still have very, modest use of them today. I mean, any campus you go to right now is, if you find anybody there after 5 o'clock, you're lucky. But how do we sort of assess that with what's remaining in the bond in terms of we're sitting there asking for more from the public, for more trust from the public. I think I sent a few of my colleagues an article, for example, from our counterparts at cities and counties where the public has lost trust in them to build housing. Because there's still more homeless people than there was 5 years ago. And even though they've built whatever amounts of thousands of units. So I don't want to sort of get stuck in a place where we're doing this. We're now on 20 plus years of the bond, and we're still not hitting numbers. How do we, how are you sort of viewing that, and how is that coming forward in terms of a dialogue and discussion?
Excellent point. I'm glad you raised that question. And one of the things that's important for us is we're at a point right now where we're looking at closing out Prop A and AA. That's our first $2.2 billion. And specifically, we're really proud of reaching the goal of what we committed to the community, and we're gonna be able to celebrate that, and we're gonna share that. We're gonna show that in a report in the very, very near future. And then building from there, looking at the goals of the 2008 Measure J plan, as well as Measure CC. Measure J was again, that was a growth, that was very specific projects and what we did on every campus. And then what we've identified in CC is an additional $3.3 billion. But at that time, there was $11 billion in need. We still believe that there's over $6 billion of repair, replacement, modernization necessary. That's one of the parts of the assessment that we need to consider. What was unmet, and did it get worse? And then considering the 1970s vintage buildings or older, we're talking about buildings we have several buildings between 50 and 100 years old, nearly 100 years old. Well, when we bring those buildings to current code, in essence, those buildings get smaller because of the circulation in the building, ensuring the ADA compliance. And as those spaces were kind of configured for a very small type setting, we're going to have to reconfigure and think about how those spaces look once we change the column size, we change the building layout. And so as those buildings get smaller, we're creating those spaces that best fit our needs today. This is not a growth plan. It's actually providing the need and ensuring that the technology can support that need today. So we're looking at that very closely. And we do believe that although our buildings haven't been used, we do have several of those buildings that haven't been used. They're obsolete. And so let's take obsolescence off the table and get to a point where we can best utilize our facilities for the long term.
Thank you. Trustee Vela?
No questions. Thank you so much.
And by the way, if you have questions that you want to ask, no one is required. We're going to be dealing with the resolution. Trustee Hoffman?
Thank you so much, Board President Buelna. And thank you so much, Dr. Smith and Dr. Litz. I thought the presentation was absolutely excellent, and I really appreciated the time, obviously, that you took to put that presentation together. And for me, it was very helpful. And I'm really glad, Dr. Smith, that you mentioned that we have, $11 billion in unmet need when we passed Measure CC. And I just want to, many of you weren't on the board at the time, some of you were, but I think I was one of the only board members. There may have been another one that really wanted to go for the maximum amount that we were eligible to approve. And I think that was 5.5 billion at the time, but the board settled on 3.3. So that being said, that was one of my questions, like how much unmet need do we have? I'm glad we're looking at what our campuses are gonna look like in the future and how we're gonna serve students. And we really need to be ready. We weren't ready for this pandemic, but we pivoted and we figured it out. But we really, as we move forward, we need to be ready to serve the students the way they would like to be served, because I don't think students are coming back to 100% capacity like they were in the past. I also appreciated your Jedi example, and that resonates well with me. There were a lot of speakers tonight, public speakers on student housing. I want to make sure that if we're considering student housing, that we know what problem it is that we're trying to solve and what kind of housing we're looking to engage in, whether we're building it, whether we're partnering, whether we're looking at, land off our site, on our site, because the need, if you listen to the speakers, the public speakers, is for, subsidized housing for students that can't afford housing. Dorm style or student housing traditionally is very expensive. When my daughter was at Occidental College, she had a free ride and she played soccer there, but the housing was really expensive. So I think we need to be really mindful when we talk about student housing. And then I just want to make one last comment, because we did talk a little bit about libraries. I recently ran across an article about a library that was designed, I think it's in Virginia. I posted it on my Facebook page, with families in mind. And the kinds of modules that they put together, there was an area where if you had to bring your babies with you, you can put them in like a little area where they're just next to you, you're on a computer and they're reading books or, you know, engaged in other activities. I think we need to realize that our student demographic is not the 18-year-old coming out of high school. Some of our students are, but many of our students are older. Many of our students have families. And if we're going to design learning spaces, classrooms, housing, libraries, other places where students gather, athletic facilities, I just want to make sure that we're keeping all of our students in mind. And I also appreciated the comment you made about athletics, not necessarily always being an organized, you know, NCAA team, but that that's much needed for recreation as well. So I really appreciate the presentation. I look forward to the conversation. I want to make sure that we're meeting often and getting updates and having input and maybe taking field trips, because if we're really talking about changing the way our facilities look, we ought to go look at some other places as well. Thank you.
That's a very good point, Trustee Alfred. Student Trustee Coraima Martinez. Only if you have a question or comment.
Hello?
Yes.
I apologize. I've been having bad connection this whole meeting. Oh. Hello. I wanted to ask if I could potentially, if this presentation could potentially be shared with us. I want to say thank you so much. It was really insightful. And I also want to echo the comments that Trustee Hoffman made. As a student myself, and students are, I know students are very eager about this, and I know that this could benefit a lot of students, but I also do have some questions as to being where we might want to build these housing projects. But I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank
we
you.
will share the presentation.
Trustee Fong.
Thank you so much, Board President Buona. And thank you so much, Dr. Smith and Dr. Litz, for that great presentation. Really appreciate it. I think as we look at doing district-wide assessments and campus-wide assessments, I really appreciate that we're having this conversation here today, because I know that some of my colleagues here, we've had conversations around West LA College, around Pierce College, City College, but now to really do the district-wide assessment around student housing needs and really looking at what our demands are, what kind of feasibility studies, looking at the desired housing models. I think doing a deep dive on that would be tremendous. And so I'm glad to hear that. And I definitely want to make sure that all our stakeholder groups are part of that process and stakeholder groups have input along the way in our shared governance process. Also on the HVAC systems and infrastructure, thanks for highlighting that as well. I know that as we come back to campus and as we make sure that our facilities are safe, that we're looking at those issues as well. I know that Dr. Smith, you brought that up last time, so thank you for all your hard work and efforts on that. And thank you to all the speakers who provided comments here today. I want to make sure that we hear you and we appreciate your comments as well. And to the workforce development partnerships, glad to see that and the work that you're doing around that. Vice Chancellor Smith, it's great work there and continued work there going forward. And Trustee Vetters touched upon this earlier, but the shared space for athletics, we continue to amplify those partnerships in the community. And I know that we always, as trustees, when we're making the rounds in the community, we always get a lot of requests to access facilities, and thank you to our facilities directors on our campuses and presidents and staff for making sure that we are accessible and open, so that it is that everyone has an opportunity to share in the space. And as we continue to look at opportunities to reduce the facilities congestion issues and to really make sure that we modernize our campuses going forward. So those are my comments. Thank you so much, President Buona.
Trustee Moreno. Hello?
Hello, yes.
Yeah. Trustee Moreno?
I have no questions.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Right. Seeing none, we're going to move on. May I have a motion and a second related to resolution D1?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the discussion phase. Vice Chancellor Litz, I believe you have your hand up.
Sorry, Trustee Buona, I had just moved her back to the attendees, but I can bring her back.
Okay. Yeah, she had a question. Or she had her hand up.
She should be in soon.
Okay. So we're going through the resolution. The resolution is in front of the trustees. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Trustee Vela, your maker of the motion. Do you have any comments or thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And, I do want to give my colleagues as well as Shepherd Mullen, who has been integral in this resolution, to also speak and discuss it. But as far as what I would like to do is share with you my own personal journey on, being in the trenches with students when it comes to housing insecurity, in particular food insecurity. So I'd like to share my screen. Let me go ahead and do that. So let's see here. I don't know if I'm that great at this.
It is showing up well.
Okay, great. Okay, so, my experience with besides my personal housing insecurity at both, UCLA and also community college and Pepperdine really has been at the core of what, I think today is all about. However, I did want to share some experiences as a trustee and in the field of education that I've dealt with. It started in 2016 and 17 as adjunct professor at East LA College. Essentially, while teaching at East LA College, I had a night class that started at 6:30 on a Friday night till 9:30, and I would often run into students that would stay late in my classroom at ELAC, and 9:30 is a pretty late closing time. However, they'd stay and walk around with me and sometimes go to the car and talk about their housing insecurity, and I felt really bad about that. But that was my first experience at LACCD while being an adjunct professor. In 2019, as a Board of Trustee member, and thanks again for the opportunity to serve, I participated in the Latino Equality Alliance LACCD student focus groups. These were LACCD students that were experiencing food and housing insecurity. In our focus groups, as you see here, the number one issue, and you see it here in this dry erase board where I was actually, this is my writing, taking notes, is you see food insecurity and housing. And so the examples of what they did and was quite shocking to me at the time. And, as a new trustee, I really listened. We're talking about people sleeping in cars, embarrassed to say that they were housing insecure. I asked them, did they reach out to their colleges? The colleges didn't have websites. The colleges didn't have a way to really reach them. Some of them, because again, housing is very, very, very intimate. And so, that was, again, one of my first experience. The third one was chairing the Chancellor's Advisory Committee on LGBTQ Affairs. Again, thank you to all of you for forming this, and Trustee Hoffman and Chancellor. But students and college reps that are part of the Chancellor's Advisory Committee on LGBT Affairs, reported that LGBTQ students experience, high incidence of homelessness and are not met where they are. So, they really don't know about what can happen and how they can get served. Students voiced that since the pandemic in our committee, many students have gone underground and do not check in with the district or colleges making it hard to make them aware of housing partnerships like LA Room and Board. And so, I immediately worked with our staff to make sure that, we did do that, and we continue to do that and promote it at our LGBTQ affairs committee meetings. And then students on my committee have also reported that they have a tough time completing their academic goals, simply because, going to LACCD and working full-time, they have to cover their rents in LA County, and these rents are very high. As a newly elected vice president, I attended Pierce College, where I met with the student and faculty housing committee. And, I learned that students and faculty and staff have worked together to begin the dialogue at Pierce College. So that was very encouraging. And then students and faculty and staff reported that single parents at Pierce have a tougher time and really are in need of dedicated housing versus the shared housing we do with our LA Room and Board partners and Jóvenes Inc. And then students and faculty and staff feel that the college should at the very least consider, right, workforce and student housing opportunities that have been proposed. And finally, my role as the Legislative and Public Affairs Committee Chair, I had various discussions with legislators in Sacramento, and their interests gave way to AB 1602, which is a zero interest loan from the state, and SB 169, which funds community college districts to partner with public or private entities to provide housing opportunities for their students. And of course, I want to applaud State Senator Maria Elena Durazo for successfully passing, Senate Bill 330 that enables us to develop an affordable housing pilot program here at LACCD. And I want to thank, obviously, my colleague, Sri Veres, for working on this in tandem with my chairmanship at the Legislative and Public Affairs. So that's my comment. I know it was in the form of a presentation, but I really did want to share that experience as a trustee, because I think part of what has happened is that a lot of people think that this is just coming, out of an interest or not organic, but this is my experience, and I live as a trustee and I listen to the students. So I wanted to make sure that you saw that I was not just saying it, but that, I showed you that I participated in these things. So thank you. And this is all the comments that I have. Thank you.
Sorry, Trustee Henderson Hoffman. And if you have any questions, just ultimately just raise your hand. I'm going around. Moreno?
Wait, didn't you say Henderson Hoffman?
Oh, Henderson Hoffman, then I skipped you, huh? Sorry. Trustee Hoffman?
Oh, you can go to Trustee Moreno first. I'll go after. It's
Okay,
okay.
Trustee Moreno?
I'd rather her go first.
Okay. You know what? If none of you, then we're going to go to Trustee Redis.
No, I'll go. I just have one quick question. Can you just reiterate what it is that the resolution is long and it's a little complicated, and it doesn't include the entire presentation that we just saw. So by approving this resolution tonight, and Dr. Smith, maybe you can answer the question, what exactly would we be approving and directing you and Dr. Litz and the Chancellor to do? If you could just kind of go over that. And I think Trustee Veres made a good point in terms of the presentation that you showed us this evening. How do we incorporate that into the resolution?
Dr. Smith, then if Shepard Mullen could weigh in as well.
I'm happy to do that.
Dr. Smith, you want to go first, then Shepard Mullen?
Sure, absolutely. Ultimately, what I've laid out as a presentation is the steps forward we'd like to take in conjunction with the resolution. So if there's a way for us to attach those, I have no problem doing that and moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I think that's an excellent idea, and I was going to suggest something similar as we got further down to page 2 of the resolution. I want to start off by, with your permission, President Buelna, to introduce myself to the trustees. Great. Thumbs up. Terrific. Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all. President Buona, honorable trustees. My name is Alfred Freiho. I'm joined by my colleague, Kira Conlon. We're both partners at Shepherd Mullen, and we have the privilege of working with the district on this important matter. The resolution before you today has two key components, and I wanted to spend just a few minutes highlighting those components and then going into the particulars of what ultimately it directs for staff to do in subsequent sections of the resolution. It has two pieces. The first is really to direct staff to engage in due diligence and studies around the unmet facilities needs of the district that may include opportunities for housing to serve the population of the district, both students, faculty, and staff. The recitals that you see in the first page of the document is a way of framing the discussion around this particular issue in terms of facilities management and facilities needs. What it talks about is, of course, the context around the importance of treating and addressing the whole student and thinking about what leads to success and excellence in academics. And we know that the district has been making incredible strides in ensuring that its campuses are addressing those needs. One of those needs, of course, has been mentioned by the trustees, is to think critically about the needs for renovating facilities, for improving facilities, for building facilities that are multimodal, that serve different functions and are adaptable. We saw from the pandemic, of course, that there is a need to rethink about how we're using our real estate assets creatively and proactively to, again, address the needs of both faculty and students. And so the beginning of the resolution is really about that, to set the stage for the two components that I will go into now. So if you turn to the second page, it's the second page on my document here, but it's really where we indicate in the first section.
If you could bring it up, please.
We're happy to do it. Can we share the screen? Okay.
To our district staff, if you could please bring it up.
We do not have it. Do you want to send it over to us?
Can Shepherd Mullen, can you share?
Absolutely.
Share.
Yeah, if you could share.
Thank you.
Okay.
Somebody's sharing it already? Okay, I think Dr. Buona, someone from staff already put it up on the screen here.
Okay, perfect.
Terrific. And it was included as part of the materials that were circulated to the public. I think this is helpful to be able to show it here. If you can scroll up to the first page, the whereas there, the name of the resolution really tackles those two components that I mentioned. The first is to direct staff to undertake the due diligence and studies we've been talking about. We will discuss shortly the importance of including Dr. Smith's presentation as part of an exhibit to the resolution, which is certainly feasible. The second part of the resolution is that second clause of the sentence in the title, which is to indicate the intent of the district to undertake and direct an election or order an election conditioned on the completion of the studies that are aforementioned. And then we'll talk about those studies in a second. So we'll go down the whereas, articulate again the context, the need, the historic innovation and work that's been done already to address facilities. The first section here has to do with very specific tasks that the resolution would direct staff to undertake. The first task is in section 1, which is to order the staff to investigate and engage in due diligence for options addressing unmet facilities and student basic needs that may include facility assessments, an updated facility conditions index, housing studies, environmental scans, public surveys, and polling. And so this really is the important a priori task, so to speak, around assessing both the facilities conditions that we have now and also potential future needs, with an eye towards also considering potential housing needs for the population served by the district. The second item there, which is subsection A, if you can stay on page 2. I'm hoping folks can see the size of the text there. Might be, we can expand on that. This one is about undertaking a study for the assessment of property evaluation. So the property evaluation component is a technical requirement that must be undertaken by the district, as you know, in regards to the prior bond that was directed to be done in order to evaluate what is the maximum amount of capital that could be raised based on property values. So it's a standard formula. The fact that you have already issued bonds puts you into a standard, an annual audit that could be also incorporated into this particular task, and something that staff is very familiar with. So item B on this, subsection B here, is the development by staff to be presented to you as trustees of a housing policy, to be able to use the policy to provide the guidance that staff will need to ultimately implement any type of housing development, housing facility contracting, etc. The housing policy is important because, as I mentioned, it sets the principles around how the district will prioritize this particular issue. What was important to us in our deliberations with staff is that we not predetermine the kinds of opportunities or objectives that we would incorporate on that. It really will depend on the diligence and the data-driven information that's going to be provided as part of that initial diligence. Moving on to page 3, please. The top of page 3 is, once we have a housing plan in place that will be presented to you as trustees and ratified to you as a board, that we implement a plan that would include specific recommendations and delivery methods for achieving the housing needs of the population. And I think this is really a key component of the resolution. In other words, we've talked even during the deliberations tonight about the need to be creative in terms of how we meet this particular need. It may not be, for example, the development of new facilities. It may include the reuse of existing facilities. It may include public-private partnerships, where we think about including other experts that have experience in operating and building faculty and student housing. It may be thinking about expanding the existing programs that you might have that now, for example, with Jóvenes Inc. and others, successful programs where it's really about partnerships and leveraging resources that the private sector can bring to the table to allow the district to satisfy this need. And again, the planning process will give us maximum opportunity to think creatively about these delivery methods. And as was mentioned by Dr. Smith, staff has comprised an expert panel of experts in development, in real estate, and in housing that will provide input for the preparation of this draft plan that will ultimately be presented to your board for approval. Finally, the remaining sections here are somewhat technical, but really they're about the intent to come back to the board to request the authorization for putting a bond measure on the ballot. The work that I've articulated, including the property assessment, are the preconditions to that possibility. The timeline that was presented by Dr. Smith anticipates an early summer presentation that would be made with those necessary assessments that would then enable the board to authorize such an election. So those are the two components. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. We spent some time to be deliberate in regards to the language that we are using. And finally, I'll just mention that as we talked about earlier, the presentation that was made by staff can certainly be integrated in an amendment to this resolution as an exhibit to the resolution. Thank you.
Trustee Hoffman, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Moreno?
Yes, it's a very unusual approach. I don't understand. Is this resolution going to, it sounds like we're maximizing the amount of money we are able to borrow. We don't even have the cost, which is a little bit different than we've done in the past. We estimate the cost of the projects that we need to address. And then we go out and discover and try to estimate the amount of money we need. This sounds like there is no end. Oh, the only limitation we have is the maximum we can borrow. Is that correct?
So if I may, President Buona, may I respond to that?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Trustee Moreno. It's a good question because I think it drives a fine point about what we're trying to achieve here. We spent some time internally thinking about the kind of homework that would be required before a specific number of capital raise that could be authorized in a ballot measure. And what we're saying today is we don't know what that number is. We want to authorize staff to undertake two key components of that research. The first is, as was mentioned previously, what's the need, right? And what's the dollar amount for that? The second is, which is required under law, which is to do a property assessment to figure out what is feasible in terms of a potential tax and what that amount of money that could be raised. And we want to make sure that the need and the cost of that need matches the amount of money that can be raised. And ultimately, as was mentioned previously by Trustee Hoffman, once we have that amount, it may be that you elect to do a smaller, lesser amount, or the maximum amount that can be raised. At this point, we're not making a recommendation about a specific number. What we're saying is we have a number of studies that need to be completed. We are committed to making sure that that process is transparent and that the updates to the board are frequent and thorough before a binding resolution can be adopted directing that election.
Yep. Let me follow up, please. So it's possible with this analysis, we could end up with a proposal that would be an amount less than the maximum we could borrow.
That is correct, Trustee Moreno.
The issues that are defined here, as the way I see it, is that apparently there are supposedly unmet needs, which is a little questionable in light of the fact we've borrowed billions of dollars and we only have 9 colleges. But whatever unmet needs, I heard the presentation that our director had made about some utilization ratios and so forth. The bottom line is that we've got a substantial number of buildings that are unoccupied and enrollment declines. We projected in building this district, we projected student growth far beyond what we had when we originally passed the first bond. Matter of fact, all of our master plans projected a growth on the part of the colleges, where in fact the regression line goes downward rather than upward, which becomes somewhat questionable. At least from an outsider's perspective, that should be a first question we'd have to address, is why, when we expected a phenomenal growth, we received an actual opposite result. And that is a major issue. I'm also interested in knowing whether or not you'll be able to give some practical analysis to how student housing would work. Of course, we're all in favor of meeting student housing needs and meeting the homeless needs that we have in our community. But as mentioned before, the question is, what is our responsibility as a district in addressing those issues? Because I think we have to look at this not only in terms of an idealistic approach, but what is the practical application of this? How does it work within the structure of the academic program, the vocational programs? And how then do we determine whether or not who pays for these locations that we're going to be building if we build them? And what are the practical concerns we would have in dealing with those issues? Because it may mean that we may have to alter our academic program to meet the needs of the housing issue, since the majority of our students are part-time students anyway. So, I mean, there are some practical issues here that I don't believe have been addressed adequately. We are all in favor of trying to deal with this homeless situation, but we don't want the passion of the time to cloud our sound judgment about the future. So it's very important we get that analyzed. And then finally, I'd like to have the Chancellor's opinion about this matter, if I could. What is the Chancellor's position on this particular proposal?
There's a lot there. Chancellor, would you like to go first, or Mr. Crapo?
Yeah, I'm happy to also weigh in, President Buona.
So do you want to go first or after Shepherd?
Well, perhaps the technical pieces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. No, Trustee Moreno, I really appreciate your comments about that, because we don't want to be, we don't want to create a set of, we know that the need is great, as you mentioned, we know that the need is urgent, not only by way of the kind of information that Trustee Vela introduced, and certainly the studies that have been completed by the district, but we know that the issue of housing insecurity is an urgent issue statewide. So we want to do it in a way that's deliberate and thoughtful, and any recommendations that would be made in a plan that we're including in the resolution would be data-driven, driven by not only the kind of need that gets evaluated, but also the costing issues. You know, one of the things that I've done in my over 20 plus years of working on these kinds of housing projects is to make sure that we are also looking at what is the risk. How do we mitigate for that risk for you as a district? And there's different methodologies that we can use to address that, and that would be articulated as part of any plan. You also mentioned the issue around cost, and also the issue around enrollment, and how fluctuations in enrollment also should inform the kinds of needs for facilities for the district in this plan. I would point to the fact that there was a previous assessment as part of that bond that was authorized in 2016 that identified 11 billion in unmet need. And the bond raised only 3.3 billion. That was the authorized an amount. So we know that there is a gap. And part of the work that we're going to do now, if it's the direction of this board, is to compare that, is to see, given the new circumstances, taking the pandemic, taking the way that our demographic of students work and study. There was a mention by one of our trustees in regards to the demographic of the student. It's single parents. It's older individuals that are accessing higher education, right? What are their needs? And all of that will be embedded in the kind of data that will be solicited by the experts that will be retained by staff. And the final thing I'll mention before turning it over to the Chancellor is, this is not without precedent. This is a kind of diligence that was undertaken prior to authorizing the bond in 2016. And we want to make sure that we tread similar ground and do our homework and make sure that whatever we bring back to this board is thorough and also informed by the surveys that we plan to undertake.
I need to clarify something. I think you said there was an $11 billion estimate. I think you need to go back and revisit that. My concern is that we don't want to have information passed at this meeting that is not accurate. That was a projection made by an individual at the time that there was no substantive basis for. There's no way, in light of all the billions of dollars we spent to rebuild this district, that we could end up with another $11 billion requirement. I mean, that is absurd. But I understand your position. I am concerned still with regard to the practical approach to this, because there is going to be a cost of control, management, and all the other things that go with that responsibility. Now, this is something that it's there's a big difference between the theory and practicality and how we're going to be able to implement such an action. I just want to make sure that all those issues and all those items are checked, that we have a clear understanding of what we're entering into and what effect it will have upon the educational community at large. The responsibilities are greater in this environment, some of which we've never thought we would ever engage in. So, but I think that we need to get the facts. So if you would you go back and look at that information about the $11 billion, which is not accurate, and whatever that amount of money that was identified at the time was clearly questionable. And I don't want to set the public, the belief in the public that we have spent this money with all these billions, and to still have a debt or an expectation of $11 billion is nonsense. Anyways, that's more of a passionate response to your comment. But I do ask that you become a little bit more, maybe more knowledgeable in this arena. We need to get more details rather than broad brush approach to salesmanship. But Chancellor, I'm interested in knowing your position.
Thank you, Shepard. Chancellor.
Thank you. All comments. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if we could mute for a minute. Thank you. Well, gosh, where to begin? An important conversation here. First, I'm familiar with this document. It's my responsibility with the board president to ensure that every piece of information that's put on any board agenda publicly, that we look at and review and support and approve. So it is. So I am seeing this document not for the first time, and the elements in it I think are well spoken, and I think broad, and then paint a particular picture for what to be a potential recommendation to the board. What is important to know is that for the members of the board and the public, we're not ordering an election today. Today we're asking the board, and the board is putting very clear its intent to be very incredibly intentional about what's described as due diligence, to make sure that if there is a recommendation to come forth in June and July, as we have foreshadowed, that it has facts, as Mr. Moreno described, that it has needs that are described, that it is delineated in such a way that we could defend both an eligible list, a number, and the kinds of improvements at each of the colleges that they can count on. There's significant due diligence that is outlined here, that's codified, and I don't think we've ever put this in writing like this in a public meeting before. It is the kinds of things that I do want to mention, that was mentioned by Mr. Vela. SB 330 already potentially outlines an opportunity for us to look at housing that would provide some benefits to builders, to folks who could construct, manage, and indeed operate a said facility for our students at substantial rates that could be passed on to students. We know that our students, over half of whom live in poverty, cannot afford market rate housing. This is not what we are talking about. So I wanted to point out that through the efforts of Senator Durazo, we already have a vehicle to explore this, and we have 10 years to do so. So we've already signaled through our sponsorship of a piece of legislation that this is something that we're doing, that today extends that due diligence. Also, what we don't have, what we will have over the next 5 months, and I want to point out, is going to be significant stakeholder engagement. So we've heard from some people today in the public comment, and we'll hear from others. And we'll ask very important questions. Who, you know, because what's in ordering of an election, and when you put these things together, the words that are paramount are repair, upgrade, construct, purchase. Those are the kinds of verbs that come out in these very, very formal documents where tax statements put in, where an assessed valuation takes place. We cannot charge for every $100,000 of assessed valuation more than $25 to the property owner. So it is something that I'm getting in some detail here because I simply wanted to let folks know this is the beginning of a very formal process that has a lot of moving parts and a lot of significant components. We've still not done a public polling. It's important to bring together, but also to separate the discussion of facilities needs and student basic needs. It could be that a public poll would suggest that infrastructure and repair and upgrade would be supported, but for some reason, housing might not, or vice versa. So that will inform a recommendation to the board potentially a few months from now. So that this is far, far from resolved. And what this resolution does, it just gives an incredibly formal direction from the board to engage in very specific action steps that will lead ultimately potentially to a recommendation that will be done 5 months from now. So that's for an election that would take place in November of 2022. The last thing I would mention here is that it requires, because we are in an accelerated, intense, and technical a body of work, it is going to require the use of experts to help us out, such as those that we have today. So I simply wanted to note that to the board. And it's important to look at this as 9 colleges, a couple of which are 75, 90, almost 100 years old. We do have aging infrastructure. We absolutely do. This does not renovate, time does not renovate buildings. Things get used. So the question for us is, what does a 21st century facility look like, given the strong standards of design, sustainability, teaching and learning that we have? So it's not just technology, and it's not just classrooms and buildings and those sorts of things. It's a lot more than that. It's the whole footprint of the millions and millions of square feet that we have that's categorized in a particular way. And the last thing I'd mention is that we have to self-fund. We should not and will not wait for the state of California to do this. We have the ability to self-fund. If we make a case to the public, we've done that 4 times already, in 2001, 2004, 2008, and again in 2016. That has now led to some remarkable facilities at our institutions. Before then, we didn't do that. We waited for buildings to be built through state funds. And they came far and in between. So now we've taken the approach to self-fund essentially our facilities. So lots of questions there, lots of due diligence that's involved. I appreciate being able to weigh in just a little bit. That's it, Mr. President.
Trustee Vettis?
Okay.
I believe Trustee Hoffman had her hand up, but if she's done with the comment or that's an error.
Do you want to come back, Trustee Hoffman? Because yours was a follow-up. It's up to you. It's up to you.
Yeah, I just have, if you don't mind, Trustee Veras, I just want to make one quick comment because I want to just be real clear when I vote tonight. And Chancellor, I think you answered my question, but a yes vote is not approving or even agreeing with the fact that we necessarily need to go out for another bond, but it's directing staff to do more in the way of studying our facilities, infrastructure, student housing. But will there be benchmarks along the way? Because what I would like is reports back on a regular basis. I realize I'm not on the facilities committee, but I think it's important for this board to see the process and get updates. So I just want to be real clear on what I'm voting on tonight.
Yeah, it's authorization to move forward to engage in due diligence, as the title suggests. We're not authorizing an election. There's no number that we're asking you to consider. So it's the engagement of due diligence.
And if we can put the update piece in the resolution, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll work with the board president. I suspect that we'll have more of these between now and then. These kinds of all board member visits on these subjects.
And I want to thank you. This has been very helpful. So thank you very much for having this meeting.
And if I may, Chancellor and Trustee Hoffman, there's some feedback there. But if I may, just to clarify that in section 2, we are recommending that there be frequent updates to the board in regards to the progress that is being made by staff to undertake these studies. So it's already embedded in the language. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Trustee Bettis.
Thank you. A couple things, and I know we've sort of referenced Dr. Smith and Vice Chancellor Litz's presentation. Mr. Frejo, how did you had talked about doing an attachment, because I want to be clear whether if we're going to do an attachment and or if we include literally, it's probably 5 simple words, and it's in the presentation: the infrastructure, sustainability, athletic facilities, technology, housing / land use that was presented. If that was sort of just called out even in section 1, and I know there's a whereas that does the due diligence in options addressing unmet needs, like if those were just listed there, I think that would sort of either directly connect to the presentation, or it sets the sort of standard that it's more comprehensive. So I wanted to, I know you talked about referencing the document, but certainly this was a frame outline template, and Dr. Smith covered and Vice Chancellor covered a number of sort of critical pieces in their verbal presentation that I wonder if it just might be easier just to add those words to the whereases and that section 1 of the document. So I'm open to take suggestions. I just want to be sure that the presentation as done is clear that all of these things will be considered and assessed and studied and not just listed per se.
I'm sorry, are you making a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to, but he referenced it earlier in his presentation, so I want to sort of respect and hear it to be clear. And if that's not exactly what you meant, then I would offer the friendly amendment to include those topic points in the whereas that says the board will engage in due diligence, and that's also repeated in section 1 that the staff is directed to investigate and engage in due diligence for and to include the infrastructure, sustainability, athletic facilities, technology, and land use. The housing is mentioned already in the subsequent item, but I just wanted to be clear that that this resolution is robust in the way that it covers the presentation and just not imbalanced and out of sort of reference.
And Trustee Vela, I actually think the wisdom of your suggestion is better than mine in terms of referencing the report so that we can have the language there. Can you repeat the couple of words that you mentioned?
So I'm taking it directly out of the presentation that Dr. Smith had. And Dr. Smith, if you want to sort of clear it up, basically you put it on the front end, and it's infrastructure, sustainability, housing. I know you divide up housing and student workforce, athletic facilities, the technology piece, and then I'm assuming land use is a broad general word. But if Dr. Smith, if you think there's other things beyond that, I think it's just a list. And it's pretty clear, and everything you guys did there covered and touched some point of that, right?
Yes, it was page 4 of the presentation.
Right.
Where we listed infrastructure, sustainability, housing, athletic facilities, technology, and land use.
Okay, and I have a suggested change if you would want to consider it, namely that we would modify section 1. Again, this is a recommendation for your consideration. And the language would read, if we can turn to section 1, that in order to inform the intention expressed herein in section 2, district staff is directed to investigate and engage in due diligence for infrastructure, sustainability, housing, athletic facilities, technology, and land use that may include, and then go on with the remainder of that sentence, Trustee Veras.
Yeah, I'll also add one more slight change, if I may, Board President? Can we mention pre-70 buildings required repairs and upgrades?
Trustee Vela, Mr. Jetter, just to be clear, in terms of a parliamentary procedure, Trustee Vela has to accept this, correct?
That is true. Or you could have it just that all amendments, particularly if there are more to come, will be accepted as friendly amendments without objection.
Trustee Vela, do you have any objection to accepting?
I have no objections whatsoever.
Got it. Trustee Vettis, any additional comments?
Sure. I was only going to say that if we can match the whereas in the section above to this exactly the same, they're structured the same. I believe the whereas is on the due diligence side. And I don't have any other thing I would suggest beyond those two things, and appreciate it being viewed as a friendly one, because I think it does reflect our conversation here. So Crystal or Lupe, if you can move up one more time. This is the same whereas there. See the whereas engage in due diligence. If we list the same words there, and as in section 1, that would cover, I think, really quite well what we had presented today.
Trustee Vela, do you accept?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if I may, Trustee Veras and Trustee Vela, can we add also Dr. Smith's recommendation? Great, just to clarify.
Yes, absolutely.
And Dr. Smith, can you repeat that for the record as well?
Yes, the addition of pre-1970s buildings, required repairs and upgrades.
Thank you.
Trustee Henderson?
Yes. What were you asking me?
Do you have any questions on the resolution as we move forward?
I had to step away for a few minutes. Are we including athletic facilities?
Yes, we are. Trustee Vettis just added it. It was accepted.
Okay, thank you. That's it. No questions or other comments.
Trustee Fong?
Thank you so much, President Bona. Thank you so much to Alfred and Kira and the Shepherd Mullen team for the presentation as well. And thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for the presentation as well. This is I think Trustee Vice President Vela eloquently in that presentation really talked about the needs of our students, and to talk about the facilities, and to talk about additional resources on how we can deal with student success, and with SB 330 on workforce housing and student housing, and really doing a full assessment of the district's real estate and facilities and partnerships that we've built out over the years with the Women Board, with Trustee Vela's leadership there, with Hoviness, Shower of Hope that Trustee Vela has led on. We need to continue to amplify those efforts to really make sure that we have physical assets, and looking at our housing studies and looking at what else we can do to support our students through unmet facilities needs. So I think with the prior presentation and with this resolution here today, and to do some assessments across the district, and really making sure that we hear from all stakeholders in this process as well, including students and faculty, staff, and in partnership as well. I think this is critical. This has been a long time coming. I think this is something we've talked about for a number of years in our retreats and our board goals and other opportunities that we've had discussions on this. So really appreciate Trustee Vela and Trustee Bona and Henderson for bringing this forward, and look forward to continued conversations around this as well, and to really make sure that the board is being informed periodically and regularly on these initiatives, and really looking at, I was there for Measure CC when we looked at the $3.3 billion facilities bond, and we did extensive work up to that point when we took a vote on the measure itself, along with a number of my colleagues that are here today. And that's been 6 years ago. And we know that 6 years, a lot of time has passed, and there's still a lot more work to be done, as noted with Vice Chancellor Smith's presentation earlier on the facilities condition index. Everything was above 10%. There was nothing that I saw that was even lower than 20%. Even though the facilities have gone better, there's still a lot more work to be done. So when we look at housing, when we look at additional assessments needs across the spectrum with those 5 categories that we just discussed earlier, this is critical, and this is something that's important. And thank you to all our speakers who provided a public comment earlier as well on this. So those are my comments. Thank you, President Bona.
You're welcome. Student Trustee Martinez, I believe you had your hand up earlier.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make some comments that are going to echo. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, thank you. I just want to make some comments that are going to echo the comments that Trustee Vela and Trustee Fong made. I think that this is very important. It shows our students that we care about their quality of education when we ensure that the facilities that are provided to them are adequate. And I forget who mentioned it, but someone said that, you know, we are in an institution of the 21st century. And it is time that, you know, it's important that we reevaluate what an institution of the 21st century looks like, and that we ensure that our institution is on par with providing an adequate and accessible education for our students, as well as I have some, in reference to the housing, student housing, I have some examples of ways in which that if we would have provided, or we do provide student housing, how this would have ensured that these students would have been able to continue with their education. So these examples are my personal examples from friends that I have. So with the return back to campus this semester, for me personally, I asked a friend of mine if they were going to have any classes on campus so that we could hang out during college hour. My friend informed me that they had dropped out due to being homeless, and that they hoped that they could return in the fall because they only had one semester left to graduate. This student was an amazing student leader, a part of a really great organization on campus, and she is a Latina and a first-gen Latina. And if we had offered student housing, then she could potentially have lived in our student housing and continued her education. Another example I have is of a friend who was in the nursing program, and because she could no longer afford to pay for her classes because she is a non-traditional student, so FAFSA timed out for her, she had to stop pursuing her education. And she is also a first-gen Latina. If we did provide housing, she could potentially continue her education as well. Prior to COVID, I had a friend who, him and his whole family had been evicted, and he had been sleeping in his car for a month. He was ashamed and embarrassed to tell anybody and had been struggling on his own. And it wasn't till we asked him why he was never around anymore that he confided in us. He felt dehumanized, that it was hard for him to reach out, and it was hard for him to find any resources. Luckily, we got in contact with another student leader who was able to provide him with some people to go to get resources. And even when he had access to resources, he still didn't take full advantage of them, not because he didn't want to take these resources, but because they were not a permanent solution. If you do not have a place to call home, if you do not feel supported, truthfully, an education is the last thing that you're focused on. You're focused on surviving. He had also been absent a lot because he didn't have any clean clothes, and a friend of ours actually was nice enough to wash his clothes for him so that he could start coming to school more, because he was also an amazing student leader that was a part of another program on campus. That is all to say that our students really, really want to pursue their education. And maybe years ago, we didn't need to offer student housing, but we are an institution of the 21st century, and our students' needs have changed. We are in the business of students. And if our students are saying that they need student housing, then I believe that we are also in the business of student housing, however that may look. And that is why I feel that this resolution would work towards better finding a solution to how our structure of housing could look like, because they're going to be taking data, they're going to be out with the students. And I think it's very important that student-centered conversations are led by students, and we have feedback by students. These are only the examples that I have, and other students came and shared examples in their support of this. I am in support of this, and I would be really excited to see LACCD have housing, because it would work towards helping students, not only that are first gen, not only that are Latino, but all students from marginalized communities, which, as we all know, LACCD primarily services students from marginalized communities. Thank you.
Colleagues, before I make any comments, I want to make sure that no one has a comment. As the president of the board, I will go last. Before I ask for roll call. Student trustee Martinez, we have a lot of smart people on this presentation today, but you're the smartest. That was a perfect presentation. Roll call.
Trustee Bona,
Absolutely, yes.
Trustee Fong,
Yes.
Trustee Henderson,
Yes.
Trustee Hoffman,
Yes.
Trustee Moreno,
Yes.
Trustee Vela,
Yes.
Trustee Vettis,
Yes.
Student Trustee Martinez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. Move on to the next item. We have a motion on item D2. May I have a motion? I'm sorry. Board members, may I have a motion on D2?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Vettis, second. Is Chancellor, who's making the presentation on this?
Let me pitch this to Mr. Jetter. This is a matter that is within the auspices of the General Counsel's office. There are procedures associated with the vacancy. So, Mr. Jetter, please take it from here.
Okay. We understand that Trustee Fong will likely be the successful candidate for the assembly seat for which he ran for. So there may be a vacancy on the board. The vacancy hasn't occurred yet, but what we're doing in anticipation of that vacancy, asking the board for direction and authority to do two things. Number one, begin the provisional appointment process, which has to be started within 60 days of the creation of the vacancy. And that is to fill the position until the next regular election. So the next regular election is November 8th, 2022. So the provisional person will serve until the second Friday in December, which would be December 9th, 2022. We'll have the election on November 8th, and whomever is elected to that position would then assume the position for the remainder of the term. So unless there are any questions.
I'll start. Trustee Fong. Trustee Hoffman, you thought I was going to go to you, but no.
Thank you so much, President Bona. No questions. Thank you.
Trustee Hoffman.
First of all, congratulations, Trustee Fong. Let's give him a round of applause. Well done. We're very excited for you. And now we know where to find you in Sacramento soon. I do have a question.
Yes.
Mr. Jetter, you said that the whoever we appoint would have to run in the next regularly scheduled election. But
yes.
This seat is that regularly scheduled election is 2024. So is that considered a special election for that particular seat?
No. So the Trustee Fong seat expires in the second Friday in 2024. So there's still 2 more years left. The person who's appointed would fill the position until the time of the next regular election. And the election that we can make is November 8th, because that's the next regularly scheduled election for the trustees. So that person, whoever runs, would then be elected to fill the remaining term of Trustee Fong's seat, which would run till 2024.
Okay, so that person conceivably, if they wanted to run again, would be running 2 years later.
Yes, in
Correct.
2024, November 2024.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Trustees, are there any questions? Not seeing any questions. Oh, student trustee Guanaima Martinez.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just wanted to congratulate Trustee Fong. That's all that I had to say.
Thank you so much.
Trustee Waldine, do you have a question?
Oh, okay. Trustee Vettis.
Okay. Being that it's a 2-year election for the unexpired term that will come up on November, is the candidate process the same as the other trustee or the other trustee seats that are open? Meaning, and I know the county has made some changes this year, say like signatures. I don't think we do a fee, but it's a bit different since we moved to the county since the last time I had a run. But are they? Is this candidate or the candidates for this seat going to be following the same instructions as other trustees that are up in November?
Yes, they'll be following the same instructions. So I will need to do, and I will prepare the resolution to call that election as well, but that's after the vacancy is official.
Okay, sounds good. And then in terms of the provisional appointment process, and I know we've done a number of updates to our board rules. We did have specific board rules that dealt with vacancies.
Yes.
I mean, we're doing a special meeting here. I believe there was a certain a number of days to circulate the application process. Has that already been? Are we within the time frame? Are we consistent with our board rules, or do we need to consider a specific modification here on this agenda item?
We are consistent with our board rules, so we'll begin the process, circulate, and we have the provisional appointment will be scheduled for April 13th. So that'll be at the regular meeting, unless you want to call a special meeting in advance of that, which you could do as well.
Now, I think last time we did it within a regular board meeting, but the materials that we're essentially going to use the same materials. The last appointment we filled was Trustee Bella.
Yes.
We'll use all the same materials. Is that by standard, or should we consider updating those materials? I don't know, Trustee Bella, you probably remember it more than us since you had to fill them out, but we had to read them. I don't know if there was, if those are the best possible applications that we can put out, or if there's some commentaries to revise, update, modernize, et cetera. We seem to have one every 2 years, I guess, 2 to 4 years, we have a vacancy. And I just want to make sure that we're up to date on all the materials that we put out.
We'll follow the same board rule. And however, if you want to make a change, we can certainly look at that. We have 60 days to get this going. So to complete the process. So
I might suggest and offer that the board officers take a look at what's been presented. Trustee Vela, for sure, you've gone through the process. So if there's ways that we can improve allowing candidates to communicate to us and present themselves, I think we were very basic. If there's ways to improve, then we should improve. So, okay, so that answers that. That seems fine. And then I also, part of this agenda item is to acknowledge, it says if the vacancy is created, we know the vacancy is created. So we're going to go a little bit more in the affirmative, and I think we're all happy for and extend warm congratulations to Trustee Fong, and hopefully you get sworn in up there quickly so we can be lobbying you on a couple of LACCD interests in this session that's coming up. So that's the beauty of a special election you're filling. You get up there right away. So congratulations, Trustee.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other comments? And I'll wait to make comments for you.
I do have a question, President Bueno. I don't know if you want me to raise my hand.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and I'm available for any feedback to GC on this issue. Yeah, I guess my bigger question is, will this vote if we vote to pass this resolution, will it move forward? Will we be then moving forward to appoint someone in April, and then that person will serve until until December, and otherwise they would, have to win the November race, correct?
That's correct. So whoever is appointed can run for the position, but they have to apply and become a candidate for the position in November 2022.
Okay, now, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I was appointed in June of 2018, I didn't run until, November of 2020. Was that because I was, there was not an LACCD election right after my appointment until 2020? Is that what it is?
Yes. For all of those seats, there was the transition from the even year election, or from the odd year election to the even year elections. And so there was no regularly scheduled election in the meantime. So all of those terms were extended, which is why yours was extended a year and a half as well.
Got it. And then one more question. If this resolution fails, then there will only be 6 trustees until November, or I'm sorry, until the next election?
No, under Ed Code 25091, you have to either within 60 days order a regular election or do the provisional. In this case, because of the timing, you have to do both. So if you don't fill the position by a provisional, then it'll go to the superintendent, LACO, to appoint a provisional.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay.
Any additional comments? Okay, so I'm going to say, we don't know if Trustee Fong is going to be here on March 3rd. So, this might be the last time we see him as our colleague. Not that we won't see him, we will see Mike Fong. I'm sure we will see Mike Fong, but he will have another title. And I want to thank Mike Fong for just being an honorable trustee, offering his leadership, doing your duty, being present. And it was an honor to serve with you on this board. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you for that. So thank you. I'm gonna make sure to do just one final round to see if there's any final comment, then we'll go to roll call.
I have one final comment, and that is if this motion fails, that means Mike Fong can't leave. Right, Mike? We're gonna keep
There
you.
you go. Trustee Hoffman, I love it. There you go.
Congratulations
Awesome.
again.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Go ahead, Trustee.
I think Trustee Henderson raised her hand first.
Trustee Henderson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say publicly, Mike, you are fabulous. I am so proud of you, and congratulations from the bottom of my heart. You are already missed, and I know that you will continue to be an advocate for this board and our district and our students in Sacramento. So, I don't have to say to you, continue to do that great work, because I know that you will. And, thank you just for being a great representative of this district.
Thank you so much, Trustee Henderson.
Trustee Bella.
Yes, I just wanted to, again, to, really reiterate all of our colleagues' comments on Trustee Fong. And, it has been just an amazing time to serve with you. I think you did a fantastic job with the chair of the Legislative and Public Affairs, because it's not an easy chairmanship. And, to think that you were doing all that, and at the same time, now we're going to go and lobby you in many ways, is just really, really an honor. And, if we can, President Buena, I would appreciate that the board does formally recognize Trustee Fong once he is sworn in Sacramento with a scroll or resolution in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Trustee Bella.
I'll give it 3 seconds before we move to roll call.
Did you, could I,
Well, you beat the 3 seconds, Trustee Moreno, so you're
I
up.
got the 3 seconds in. Thank you, Mike. You're always a gentleman. Congratulations. And I'm sure you'll be representing all of our conservative views in Sacramento.
Well, that caught some of us.
Thank you so much.
I had to unmute to laugh. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Trustee Moreno. President Bona, if I may.
Yes, you may have.
Thank you so much, President Bona, and for your leadership and efforts here at the LA Community College District, and to all my colleagues, to Vice President Vela, to Second Vice President Henderson, to Trustees Hoffman, Vettis, and Moreno. Thank you so much for all your leadership and efforts and advocating for our students each and every day. These past 7 years has been a privilege of a lifetime to serve with each and every one of you here at the district, along with our chancellor, our college presidents, our staff, our faculty, and our students. And you just heard from student trustee Karaima Martinez talking about she said it so eloquently, the work that needs to be done each and every day to continue to advocate for our students, to expand opportunities for education, to make community college more accessible. The work that we've done to add workforce centers, strong workforce funds, the free transit passes with all of your leadership here, and then the housing partnerships, the internships, and for our students as well. That's something that's grown over the years. The work that we've done with the API committee on data disaggregation, on the pilot leaders, post-surveillance leaders of tomorrow, on support for our undocumented students. It's in our dreamers. It's been an amazing 7 years. And although the results have not yet been finalized, I really appreciate all the support and voters from the voters of the 49th Assembly District and all the work that we've done in the past 7 years here to whether it was Measure CC as well. And I'm glad we're having a conversation on additional facilities going forward. I'm just so grateful and honored and to have had the opportunity to serve with each and every one of you. And thank you so much again to all of you, to our faculty, to our staff, and to our students. Keep up the great leadership and embracing the hopes and aspirations of our students. Thank you so much. Love you guys.
All right. In 3 seconds. Roll call.
Trustee Buelna,
Yes.
Trustee Fong,
Yes.
Trustee Henderson,
Yes.
Trustee Hoffman,
Yes.
Trustee Moreno,
Yes.
Trustee Vela,
Yes.
Trustee Vettis,
Yes.
Student Trustee Martinez.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, that passes. Before we move to approve facilities item E1, Dr. Smith will be providing a brief overview of the recommended action being presented. Dr. Smith? Does that mean the entire board is suspended?
No, it does not. So please do not be alarmed by the request for authorization to suspend a board rule. We have Bond Capital Construction Director Ian Earhart to give a very, very brief presentation to relieve your concerns, if you have any, around this request. But ultimately, this is actually something that we look at for one, procurement and the contracts that lead from that for our agency CM with centralized staff support. We want to minimize our participation for small and disabled veterans could ultimately be at 33% plus, opposed to just the minimum, meeting a minimum threshold for 30%. So without further ado, I'll let Director Earhart go through this really, really quickly.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Smith. Good evening, President Buelna, Trustee and Chancellor. Congratulations, Trustee Fong. You'll be missed, my friend. We've done a lot together in the past couple of years, so thank you all for your support. So I wanted to thank you all taking the time this evening to hear a brief presentation on the request to suspend 3 board rules as they relate to our current staff augmentation procurement. As a quick background, the district is presently in the midst of procuring a revision to the current staff augmentation model that is being provided at each of our 9 campuses, currently known as the College Project Teams, or CPTs. You've heard that term a couple of times. The goal and the anticipation is to have single agency CM at each of the campuses representing the district. These firms will continue to provide PM and CM services while still being augmented by our essential support services from our program management offices, utilizing our current MATOC contracts. We represent the agents and CMs as the college project leadership teams. Next slide. Nope, didn't transition for me. There we go. As a part of this, at this time, this is part of this procurement only. Each firm is not required to meet the current LACCD board goals, although it does not stop a firm from subcontracting to one another. So any of the firms can subcontract to one another as we move forward with this. It's the district's intent that by suspending the board's goals, we will be providing small and disabled veterans firms the chance to secure prime contracting opportunities at 3 of the 9 colleges. And that's what Dr. Smith was talking about, that 33% and above, providing a unique opportunity for smaller firms that would never have a chance to prime as a whole at a campus or a college. Next slide. So as part of the procurement, the ongoing procurement that we have now, it's been determined that 3 of these board rules conflict with the intent to provide the local small disabled veteran firm participation. Therefore, we are recommending the following board rules be suspended. Next slide. Board Rule 7103.177, which establishes the goal of the 33% participation for LACCD firms. Board Rule 71501, which establishes the 30% goal for leases, procurements, goods, and services provided to the district. Next slide. And finally, Board Rule 71504, that requires a 10% of available points as an evaluation metric for that goal. Next slide. So how we plan on preserving the LACCD opportunities, we've broken up the procurement into two categories. Category A being City College East, Pierce, Trade, Valley, West. And how we plan on doing that for a 50% points being provided as a bonus to the firm having principal headquarters in Los Angeles County. And then to continue for category B, which would encompass Harbor, Mission, and Southwest, we're awarding 250 bonus points to small and disabled veteran businesses. Local has been removed due to the fact that large firms can secure the bonus points for category B. And then the emerging was removed because a firm needs to be in business providing similar services that were requiring 4 or 5+ years. Emerging stops at that 5-year mark. The RFP and the RFQ do not preclude, again, any LACCD firm from sub-consulting with any prime agency CM firm within this procurement. Next slide. So today's board action, we're requesting the authorization to suspend these 3 board rules, 7103, 7103.17B, 71501, and 71504 for the college leadership procurement contract. And again, this is only for this specific procurement action. And any questions?
Trustee Buona, or maybe Trustee Vela, you might need to jump in. You're on mute.
Trustee Buona, are you there? Thank you so much, Ian. Really appreciate that. And we'll go ahead and now that you've presented, go ahead and go around the trustees if they have any questions.
Trustee, I have one.
Oh, absolutely, Trustee Bettis.
Thank you. I don't have any. I think the suspensions of these particular rules are thoroughly explained, and I think are clear for what the actual intent of the suspension are. So I appreciate that. I don't have questions there. I do generally have I'm trying to sort of assess that, because many of the firms, even though we've provided these programs, we're at what, close to 20 years of program here. there's a consistent core of consultants and contractors we've used. Have we? What if we? You know, I think there's been in the past where we've been considered evaluations or attempted to do some version of evaluations. In your process ahead of you, how much are you taking into account? Because as we try to modify, just try to understand, you know, performance or evaluation or those kinds of things as part of a process. And I will say this as well. Many of the prime firms, there had been concerns with smaller firms who had been on teams who oftentimes were not given an opportunity to compete or pass resumes forward. And maybe those were just problems with MATOC that we're trying to correct. And I would assume that Mr. Earhart and Dr. Smith, that you guys can understand and recognize that. But I don't, is that part of an evaluation, or is that part of how do we, because, you know, these are very sort of objective, you know, like sort of check, you either got it or you don't. But there's a subjective element also that's immensely complicated in ultimately what we're trying to get at, because if we have a small firm that doesn't seem to have the kind of support system or maybe mentoring, I know Dr. Smith, we talked about mentoring in the past from larger firms, it may not be getting at our goals, that the overall goals that we've had for LACCD. So, you know, it's not a perfect way, but I get the suspensions, I get where you're trying to go, and maybe there's other elements in the evaluation that can consider those kinds of things.
Well, I think you make an excellent point. One of the challenges, I'm sorry, can I answer that? Oh yeah. So one of the challenges we have with MATOC is that we really don't have an opportunity to evaluate a firm, because what happens so often is individuals leave one firm, go to another firm. And so we don't receive the benefit of the culture of that organization at all. Even if we try to create that arranged mentorship, partnership opportunity, it gets away from us because of the limitations of the control of that relationship. With agents moving to agency CM, now we have a better opportunity to do that, especially if they partner. Now there's more influence from us, because not only do we go through the procurement process and there's an interview and scoring, that's that entire team. Instead of, you know, positions become available, they get posted, and it's a blind process. You really don't know who works for who. So, you know, in efforts, and you've raised that concern when you were board president, that's kind of the mix and why we've developed this college project leadership team in this way, to hopefully ensure that we've cleaned that up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
I have a comment. Are we taking comments yet?
It's all in the pool.
Okay, so I agree with Trustee Pettis, and you know, this is the right thing to do for such an important part of this procurement process. And you know, again, I want to thank Trustee Pettis and his leadership last year for creating this model that would incentivize really, you know, smaller, you know, diverse firms to be able to prime with us, which is, you know, unprecedented, but much needed. So again, I want to, you know, reiterate the support for this. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other comments before roll call?
Can I make a quick comment? Oh, I thought I put my hand up.
Yes, you may, Trustee.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the information and the presentation. Dr. Smith, so the RFQ has already gone out,
Yes.
and then there's an RFP to follow the RFQ. Is that how that works?
Yes, the RFQ closed last week.
Okay.
And then from the RFQ, that pre-qualification basically process will lead us to the RFP, and those invitations will go out, you know, in the very near future, after we've gone through the scoring process and review process.
And then you have workshops for, or the workshops happen before the RFQ? Is that how the process works? Okay.
Yes.
And then what is the timeline? You said it in a short period of time, but what's the timeline?
And
RFP?
Director Earhart, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking within less than 8 weeks.
Okay.
Correct.
Great. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, President Buolna.
My pleasure. Any other comments? Lupe, in honor that this is I'm 99.99% sure that this is Trustee Fong's last vote as a trustee. Can you pull Trustee Fong out of order and have him be the first person to vote on this, and everyone else alphabetically?
I sure will. And we still need a motion on this one too.
Oh, that little thing. Sorry. So, board members, we need a motion to pass E1. Is there a motion? Before someone makes a motion, Trustee Fong, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'd love to make the motion. Thank you, guys. Thank you, President.
And I'll take the president's privilege of seconding that motion. Any other comments? Lupe, with that instruction on the voting order, roll call.
Okay. Trustee Fong,
Yes.
Trustee Buolna,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Trustee
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Kaufman,
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Trustee Moreno,
Yes.
Trustee Vela,
Yes.
Trustee Vettis,
Yes.
Student Trustee Martinez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, that passes. I'm not sure if we've ever had a meeting where everything is passed unanimously. I'm just gonna, make that comment. Are there any announcements? May I have a motion to adjourn from Trustee Fong?
So moved to adjourn the meeting. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
All right, there being no objection, well, we are adjourned.
Ordered. Thank you.
Everybody.
All right.
Good night, everyone.